Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 161. Ultimate Hidden Skill, Air Flower Style Whipping. Chapter 161. Ultimate Hidden Skill, Air Flower Style Whipping. See, Junior Master, this man is completely nuts. The disciple was extremely enraged. No issues. Yours truly wishes to give it a shot. Would you guys please leave first? Lin Fan took the whip out of the disciple's hands. Yes. The disciple nodded his head. Now that this fella's cultivation base was sealed, there should probably be no way he could harm Junior Master. As for Junior Master's words about saving this man, that was definitely impossible. As for the genius disciple, the sect themselves had tried over the years to not give up on him. But as the years went by, he only grew ever more deranged and changed completely. On the outside, a few disciples were deep in whispers. Senior brother, what did Junior Master mean? Is there still any hope for Mie Changqi? An outer sect disciple asked suspiciously. I've got no idea what Junior Master intends to do, but Mie Changqi is irreconcilable. Back then, even Grand Master himself made his way down. But in front of him, Mie Changqi was impudent all the same, even taunting to kill all of the sect's disciples. We should probably inform the elder of this matter. Even though Mie Changqi's cultivation base is sealed, he is still a dangerous person nevertheless. Yes. Within the room, young one, look at me. Lin Fan lowered his voice and focused his eyes on Mie Changqi. What for? Mie Changqi growled. Those eyes were deadlocked on Lin Fan, and he couldn't wait to tear the brains out of Lin Fan. Do you acknowledge your mistakes? Lin Fan asked solemnly. With the wave of his hand, Lin Fan cracked the whip through the air. HMPH. Mie Changqi never apologizes for any kill he makes. PSSH. Just then, Lin Fan swung the whip over to Mie Changqi's crotch. Mie Changqi's body was beyond strong, hence he definitely needed to use that bit more strength. And this spot was specially chosen by Lin Fan. Based on his current understanding, the purpose of training was to allow one to feel shame and submit before him. Mie Changqi yelled. Within those eyes was a strand of disbelief. His body was tempered beyond this world and bulky. How could he still feel pain? How dare you humiliate me? I'll kill you. Mie Changqi was even more deranged than before. But since his cultivation base was sealed up and his limbs tied up, all he could manage was the incessant clanking of the chains shackling him. Lin Fan frowned. This wasn't the feeling from before. Trainer did not seem to be working out too well. Contemplating for a moment, Lin Fan wondered for a bit. Just then, with the raise of his hands, Lin Fan swished the whip at the 4 chains shackling Mie Changqi. With the chains unlocked, Mie Changqi fell to the ground, free once more. Mie Changqi was on all fours. He did not raise his head, nor did he speak. But his eyes burned with a rage that he could not contain. Die! Mie Changqi rushed at Lin Fan, disregarding the latter's cultivation base. Impudent, Lin Fan raised his whip and slashed through the air. PSSH. PSSH. Like lightning, 2 streaks appeared across Mie Changqi's face. Mie Changqi, who was about to rise, realized something. Something changed. An unspeakable aura filled the room, and this aura caused Mie Changqi's heart to thump furiously. This feeling, Mie Changqi clutched at his chest. This was not good. Looking at his behavior, Lin Fan pondered for a moment. Did trainer work? But evidently, this Mie Changqi was one hell of a stubborn boy. If he were to have this boy fully submit, he would have to go all out. Lin Fan stepped forward and kicked him lying face up on the ground. With one leg on Mie Changqi's chest, Lin Fan shouted, "Look at me." No, I won't. Mie Changqi felt a fear in his heart. This was a feeling he had never felt before. To think that that unwavering heart of his would feel fear, and in fact, a feeling of submissiveness. HMPH. Lin Fan snorted coldly and began swirling and twirling his hand. The whip twisted like a snake and wrapped itself around Mie Changqi's crotch. Ah! Mie Changqi cried out. The object on his crotch was tightly wrapped by the whip, and with the rush of blood towards the area, it felt like it was going to explode. This was Lin Fan's virgin attempt at these type of punishment plays. He was a little afraid and nervous as well. But for the sake of experimenting with his new side profession, he had to do it. "Look at me," Lin Fan shouted again as he lifted his hand. Mie Changqi cried out in pain repeatedly as the object on his crotch felt like it was dropping off. This cruel and inhumane punishment was something that Mie Changqi had never experienced before. But just this once, Mie Changqi actually felt like he was being destroyed bit by bit. The disciples waiting outside had goosebumps as they heard the cries from within. What exactly is Junior Master doing? No idea, but this is the first time I've heard Mie Changqi scream so tragically. Ha ha ha, seems like Junior Master has finally gone for it. Mie Changqi will pay the price for his defiance. ... Look at me. Mie Changqi turned his head slightly to gaze at Lin Fan, with fear brimming within his eyes. But even more than fear was the feeling of shame, as his crotch continued to tear apart. Do you acknowledge your mistakes? Mie Changqi is never wrong. Mie Changqi did not dare to look Lin Fan directly in the eyes as he continued shouting haughtily. HMPH, still no growth. Lin Fan was getting furious. He kicked Mie Changqi up in one swift motion. Throwing out his whip, he spun Mie Changqi around. Crouch on all fours. N-O-V-E in .C ohm. Lin Fan realized there was something wrong with this position, but it was too late. He could only follow through with it. Bam! Falling down, Mie Changqi landed on his knees, and his hands slapped down onto the cold ground. Just then, the whip in Lin Fan's hands seemed to have grown eyes and sliced open Mie Changqi's pants, revealing his backside. PSSH. PSSH. Like a lively snake, the whip in Lin Fan's hands danced on Mie Changqi's backside. With the boost of trainer, the whip was like a mystical weapon which left streaks of red etched deeply onto Mie Changqi's backside. Mie Changqi's expression changed. With every oncoming whip, he could feel his heart breaking down into a smaller piece. No, I'm sorry. The initial haughty Mie Changqi broke down into tears. Upon hearing this, Lin Fan leapt with joy. After all, a savage torture as such had better work as well. But just at that moment, Lin Fan realized something. Shit, something was wrong. Ding, inauguration of trainer's first successful training. Complementary hidden skills uncovered. Air flower style whipping. Ding, system will hand out the complementary skill now. User, please do not blink and learn with your heart. F***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CK no. Lin Fan was absolutely flabbergasted. Yours truly was not a sadist. Translator's thoughts. Lamb. This has gotta be one of the best chapters ever. Wow, are you bloody kidding me? Ha 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 ha. They seriously put an SM into this Chapter 162, Unkillable Indestructible. Chapter 162, Unkillable Indestructible. But it was all too late. However hard Lin Fan tried to resist, his body betrayed him. That familiar smell, those well-trained moves, it was as though he had done it 1,000 times before. Lin Fan threw open his arms and took in a deep breath, as the whip on his hand landed on the ground. Opening his eyes, the look was one of someone who had seen through this world and everything within it. It was a look of enlightenment. Hidden arts, air flower style whipping. Lin Fan's lips pursed as he whispered these words, his eyes gleaming. Dragons and snakes seemed to dance together as heaven and earth exchanged places, and the air was filled with streaks of whips. Mie Changqi was held floating in midair by an invisible force, his arms and legs spread-eagled. In an instant, his clothes flew off and he was stark naked. The whips danced even faster and soon, one could no longer make out the shape of the whip, only the sounds of it cracking in the air. Looking at the events unfolding, there was nothing left of Mie Changqi's initially haughty and arrogant expression. All that replaced it was a look of fear. No, please. No please, I'm wrong, I know it, please. PSSH. Initially, Lin Fan closed his eyes gently as he dared not face the scene head-on. But at the end of the day, the hidden arts required one's own understanding, no matter the situation ahead. For the sake of the future, for the sake of the arts, for the sake of the salvation of this world, Lin Fan relented. If he were not the one to step into hell, who would? The only sounds left in the room was the cracking of the whip and Mie Changqi's tragic cries. The perfect harmony of these sounds was just like the lovely music of the heavens. As Lin Fan's whip etched streak after streak of unspeakable scars, Lin Fan truly understood. The true essence of training someone was not to shame, but to bring the person into a future so bright. Only when one had gone through many tribulations and trials could one truly see the light and meaning of life. Lin Fan truly understood it. But after a moment, he sighed helplessly. He could no longer think of any excuses for it. This hidden art of training was truly just sadism. After a short while, the demonstration of the hidden arts was over. Looking at the bloodied and bruised body of Mie Changqi, Lin Fan's eyes held some guilt. From head to toe, Mie Changqi was covered in whip prints. Every single one of those scars was a humiliation. To any man who had so much pride, this was akin to taking his life. I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I truly am. From this day forth, I'll obey anything you say. The stark naked Mie Changqi scrambled and crawled over to Lin Fan while pleading. With tears and mucus streaking down his face, it was a sight too much to bear for Lin Fan. Hold up, Lin Fan stopped him with authority. You gotta be kidding me. Was this guy for real, running over here stark naked? Mie Changqi was truly fearful of Lin Fan. The moment Lin Fan ordered him to stop, he halted still at the very spot. Put on your clothes properly first. Yes, after going through such a trauma, the initially haughty Mie Changqi was now obedient as a dog. Lin Fan was extremely heartened at this change. At least, his efforts had not gone to waste. Pulling over a stool, Lin Fan sat down and looked at Mie Changqi. Now, tell me everything you want to say honestly from the start. Yes, Mie Changqi nodded his head without any hesitation nor pretense. Towards this man, Mie Changqi was extremely fearful. Looking at him made Mie Changqi feel as though he could hide nothing, and was being read like an open book. I was a genius of glory sect. There was a treasure that was extremely precious to me. I killed my junior brother to obtain it. The treasure could raise my powers significantly, and I could reach a state of reincarnating everlasting life. Mie Changqi said. Lin Fan was nodding along the story. But as Mie Changqi got to the portion of the treasure's powers, he was somewhat doubtful. How could something be so bl***y strong? Reincarnating everlasting life. Didn't that mean that even if one were to die, they could reincarnate and restart all over again? Could something like that exist? Lin Fan started getting pissed off. Could it be that Mie Changqi was not trained well enough and was trying to pull a fast one on him? Suddenly, within the closed room, the tension changed repressively. Mie Changqi could sense that Lin Fan was starting to get angry and he continued immediately, every single word is the truth. I swear, I found the treasure in a portion of some ruins. And it was even inscribed in the records of the ruined sect that it belonged to a powerful ancient being. What's the skill called? Lin Fan asked. Unkillable indestructible. Elaborate more. I shall determine if it's true. Lin Fan said without changing his expression. But in his heart, he was brimming with excitement. Such a powerful skill. If he were to master it, he'd definitely fly by leaps and bounds. Unkillable indestructible. Just the name itself was plenty overpowered. Coupled with the system's effects, he could even level it up indefinitely. I don't know, Mie Changqi muttered after contemplating for a long time. Looking at Lin Fan's eyes carefully, he added, honest, I truly don't know. Lin Fan squinted at this guy and laughed. He was close to exploding within his heart. Was this guy acting in front of him? After all the love and care he showered upon this fella. Unforgivable. Lin Fan gripped the whip. Perhaps the lesson from before was too easy. It was time for a harsh one. Looking at Lin Fan stand up and the whip in his hands, Mie Changqi started trembling. I seriously don't know. Back then, it was just like a wave of knowledge had entered my consciousness. But every time I tried to read into it, it was all fuzzy, and I couldn't make sense of what it was. Mie Changqi explained hurriedly. If he had said it slightly later, who knew what his fate might have been? Lin Fan looked at the trembling face of Mie Changqi, and his frown went away. What was going on? The way Mie Changqi looked didn't seem like he was lying about it. Could it be that there was some hidden secret behind, unkillable indestructible? That was why this guy was unable to replicate its effects. Sometimes, I dream of entering a strange place. It is a weird environment filled with all sorts of strange living organisms and creatures. At the same time, there are a lot of martial artists. All of them were powerful beings who could easily destroy Earth anytime if they had wanted. I could sense that from them. But suddenly, everyone would die. The skies would turn blood red as everyone's corpses would drop onto the floor one by one. At this point, Mie Changqi looked demented. He was busy trying to gesticulate something with his fingers, as though he was describing something horrific. All right, shut it. Lin Fan was exasperated at this point. He was so close yet so far to this skill. What a helpless situation this was. And just as Lin Fan was prepared to follow up with the questions, voices came from the outside. Elder, Junior Master Lin is inside punishing Mie Changqi. A disciple said outside. Okay, let's head in to take a look. Mie Changqi is extremely dangerous and violent. We must not let junior brother Lin come to any harm. Lin Fan glared at Mie Changqi, warning the latter to behave appropriately. Tossing away the whip, he put on his most benevolent and educational look. It was as though everything had such a perfect outlook. So, do you acknowledge your mistakes? Chapter 163, What an Obedient Mie Changqi. Chapter 163, What an Obedient Mie Changqi. Elder Kui was the elder in charge of the punishment hall, and oversaw the countless number of prisoners within. Each time a disciple from the sect entered the hall, he would be pained in his heart. After all, these were all the sect's disciples. How could they relegate to such a state? And amongst the few hundred prisoners, naturally, the one whom Elder Kui was most heartbroken about was none other than Mie Changqi. He was a talented genius of the sect, one of a kind that rose every few hundred years. Every single person with authority in the sect had high hopes for him to one day bring the sect to greater heights. But little did they expect him to one day lay his hands on a fellow disciple. Just that point alone was unforgivable. The 6 years of captivity was of course not the sect's main intentions. If he had even shown any bit of remorse, the sect would definitely forgive him and put him to great use once again. But the moment Mie Changqi was thrown into punishment hall, he changed entirely. He did not give anyone even a single bit of respect. And now junior brother Lin intended to bring Mie Changqi back to salvation. That was definitely a fool's dream. In the sect's point of view, Mie Changqi had lost any bit of heart and soul he had, and they no longer bore any hope for him. But the moment Elder Kui opened the doors, he was greeted with a shocking sight. All the chains that shackled Mie Changqi had been released. Looking again, he saw junior brother Lin sitting there lifelessly. Junior brother, are you all right? Elder Kui hurried forward and showed his concern. He was worried that this sinful disciple may have injured Lin Fan. But upon seeing Lin Fan safe and sound, he let out a sigh of relief. Lin Fan smiled and waved his hands, expressing his well-being. Sinful disciple, what are you up to? Upon noticing the vicious look of Mie Changqi, Elder Kui asked angrily. Now that his cultivation base was sealed by the senior elder, how dare he continue to be so impudent? Irreconcilable, what a tragedy of the sect indeed. Rar, your father will kill you. The initially well-behaved Mie Changqi was thoroughly incensed all of a sudden. Glaring at Elder Kui, he was ready to fight the latter to his death. Even if his cultivation base was sealed, he was determined to fight with all he had. What a precarious situation. By the looks of it, Mie Changqi must have entirely changed. The feral nature of a beast had already taken root within his heart. To cause him to change entirely would definitely be a tougher task than ascending the heavens, thought Lin Fan. Elder Kui frowned and shook his head. This disciple was totally done for. But just then, something unbelievable happened. Kneel down. Seated down at complete ease, Lin Fan spoke calmly in a deep and soft voice. As to Mie Changqi, Lin Fan had an inkling of what was happening. Even though he was totally tamed by yours truly, he retained his aggressiveness towards anybody else. Perhaps, this was a good thing to Lin Fan after all. Lin Fan's voice was extremely normal and casual to the ears of Elder Kui and the other disciples. But to Mie Changqi, it was like thunder roaring through his ears. That berserk heart of his stopped suddenly, and like the voice of a devil's advocate, Mie Changqi found it hard not to submit to this voice. Plop! In an instant, the frenzied Mie Changqi collapsed onto his knees on the floor and buried that haughty face of his on the ground. The ferocious nature from before disappeared instantaneously. This, Elder Kui, who was about to strike down Mie Changqi, was utterly stunned by the sight of this. He could not believe that this man who had lost any bit of soul as a human had just listened to junior brother Lin's commands. This was unbelievable. How could this be? The disciples from around asked in shock. Mie Changqi no longer has any heart, and he disregards everybody. Why is he so obedient suddenly? What did Junior Master Lin do to make him submit? Deep in discussion, none of the disciples could believe this. After all of them had known Mie Changqi way longer than Junior Master Lin had. Mie Changqi was a strong and domineering man who would not submit to anybody ever. Even when the Grand Master himself had come down to implore Mie Changqi to repent, he was shouted at rudely by the latter. In a fit of rage, the Grand Master decided to give up on him entirely and let him survive on his own. But to think that this disrespectful bastard would actually listen to Junior Master Lin's words. This was just impossible. What was that attitude to Elder Kui? What are you waiting for? Apologize. Lin Fan was neither angry nor agitated. But that soft voice was like thunder roaring in the ears of Elder Kui and the other disciples. They had once heard these very words from the Grand Master himself to Mie Changqi, but to no avail. But whether or not they believed it, what was happening right before their eyes was very real. Mie Changqi raised his head and looked at Elder Kui and the surrounding disciples with a look of fear on his face. Elder Kui, I am sorry. Your disciple, me, was wrong. This short sentence came out of Mie Changqi's mouth like normal speech. But in the ears of Elder Kui and the other disciples, it was like thunder. This was unbelievable. Elder Kui turned that appalled face towards Lin Fan, junior brother. How did you do it? Elder Kui was in denial. He had not expected this stubborn and strong-headed disciple to actually give in to Lin Fan. This. Lin Fan smiled gently and lifted his head, revealing a face of regret. These disciples are mere kids. For those who had gone on the wrong path, it is up to us to guide them and return them to the glorious path of life. Even though Mie Changqi here is somewhat mischievous, he is not beyond salvation. I had a good talk with him and explained some ideas and thoughts to him. Even though the effect seems to be good, he still needs to be observed for a while. To Lin Fan, these were all geniuses of the sect. Now that this side profession as a trainer was so bl***y strong, of course, he could not waste it and had to make use of it properly. If he could pull Mie Changqi to follow him, then he would have an easy time in the future ahead. Especially when Mie Changqi strongly resembled all the anti-heroes he had read of in the past. Then there was the unkillable indestructible, which was like a gold mine holding a gigantic secret. Even though they had yet to uncover the secret, based on how stories went, the truth would definitely be unveiled one day. Especially for Mie Changqi's case, Lin Fan could tell that his story was just beginning to unfold. Since Lin Fan's brains were smart, his ideas were definitely sharper than most people as well. If anyone were to be this strong early on, they'd definitely be powerhouses later in the game. And since Lin Fan held this great gold mine, the end game was guaranteed. All he had to do was continue to train this guy up. Upon hearing Lin Fan's words, Elder Kui's face changed despite feeling helpless. It wasn't that they did not bear any expectations for Mie Changqi to return to the sect one day. But this guy had entirely lost his human heart and wouldn't give anyone a chance. Now that he was so obedient to Lin Fan, it was indeed a shocker to everyone present. Looking at everyone's dumbfounded faces, Lin Fan let out yet another smile. Of course, if Mie Changqi was to disobey him, all that awaited him was another round of air flower-style whipping. Chapter 164, Failure of a Master. Chapter 164, Failure of a Master. Leaving him back in the punishment hall, Lin Fan did not bring Mie Changqi out with him. Even though the first experiment could be considered a success, he needed to see the results after a few treatment sessions. Mie Changqi was a haughty and aggressive guy after all. It'd be better to only think about bringing him out after Lin Fan had completely and totally trained him. Since you want to turn over a new leaf, you better behave yourself. Lin Fan pointed at Mie Changqi and said calmly before he left. Yes. The obedient Mie Changqi nodded his head. As Lin Fan left, Elder Kui and the other disciples stared at his back view, stupefied. What the hell was going on? Why was the aggressive and brutal Mie Changqi so meek and obedient in front of Lin Fan? Upon leaving the punishment hall, Lin Fan was only filled with ecstasy and joy. Seemed like this trainer was bloody goddamn strong. Perhaps the methods were somewhat cruel. But to people like Zhang or Go and the likes who were already obedient, he need not go to that extent. Just a single sentence and a glance were enough to let them understand his meaning. The transformation of Mie Changqi spread through the sect like wildfire. All the disciples knew that Junior Master Lin had been to the punishment hall and met with the evildoing and vicious Mie Changqi. And the end result was just mind-blowing. To think that Mie Changqi was actually subdued by Junior Master Lin and acknowledged his wrongdoings. This was just unbelievable. Grand Master's Hall. Elder Kui was reporting on the events that had happened in the punishment hall. Grand Master, Mie Changqi had indeed gone through a thorough change. I've seen it with my very eyes. Elder Kui said solemnly. Grand Master Yan's expression changed slightly, although he was still skeptical for the most part. Towards Mie Changqi, he had invested a lot of energy and time. He once had high hopes for this man to glorify Glory Sect in the future. Yet, He was disappointed gravely. Yours truly shall head with you to take a look. Grand Master Yan was still doubtful. He had to see it with his very eyes. Within the punishment hall, Mie Changqi was still locked up in a cell. But compared to the past, he was mellowed down quite a fair bit. For starters, he was no longer shouting and spewing vulgarities and threats. On the whole, he did seem like he had changed. Within the dark punishment hall, a tear appeared in the air. Growing larger, two men walked out of the shadows. Grand Master Yan and Elder Kui. For this ex-genius disciple, Grand Master Yan still had a fair bit of concern. Even despite the airs in his ways, Grand Master Yan still hoped that he would come to his senses one day. Even though he had doubts about Elder Kui's words, he still had to see it for his very eyes to verify the truth. Disciple son, looking at the man who was shackled on the pole, that ever-calm face of Grand Master Yan changed ever slightly with heartbreak. This was a man he had once taken personally under his wings and cared for with love. Upon seeing him again, naturally, Grand Master Yan's heart felt a wrench. Shackled on the pole, Mie Changqi stirred and looked up. Those peaceful eyes of his flashed with anger and rage as he started growling like a beast once more. Kill, Highs. Grand Master Yan sighed with desolate eyes. Mie Changqi, this is the Grand Master. How dare you be impudent? Elder Kui was puzzled. Mie Changqi was not this way earlier on. How had he reverted so easily? I'll kill every single one of you with my very hands. Mie Changqi spewed as the chains shackling him began to rattle violently. Those beastly eyes of his were looking for a kill. Forget it, forget it. Grand Master Yan waved his hands. The only sliver of hope he had left had now vanished entirely into thin air. Grand Master, this isn't the case. When junior brother Lin arrives, we'll know the truth. Elder Kui replied hurriedly. Mie Changqi had gone through a thorough change just the other day. How had things come to this? All right, let me know then if Lin Fan comes again. Grand Master Yan replied softly, finding it hard to believe that Mie Changqi had changed entirely. Yes, Elder Kui nodded his head. He could only wait for the arrival of Lin Fan from here on. Over the next few days, Lin Fan made trips to the punishment hall repeatedly. Indeed, the side profession trainer was not to be scoffed at. Before he thoroughly understood it, he would not use it haphazardly. But towards Mie Changqi, Lin Fan was slowly growing confident over time. He was sure that he had done a good job training up Mie Changqi. Lin Fan had given some of the other criminals a go at experimentation as well. As expected, the results were very satisfactory. But Lin Fan did not have any plans for those other disciples. Stand still. The fearful Mie Changqi stood still as a log. He did not dare to defy Lin Fan's will. Looking at the scene before him, Lin Fan was just pleasantly gleeful. Seemed like Mie Changqi was well trained. Not too bad. Now, this led to the question, how should he get Mie Changqi out of this place? Killing a fellow sect member was not a small crime. He wondered if the Grand Master would pardon this man. At the same time, two figures were hidden within the shadows invisibly. How could this be? Grand Master Yan could not believe his very eyes. Was this the same disciple who had shown such defiance in front of him? But how was he so meek towards Lin Fan? This was a world of differences. Grand Master, as you have seen, Mie Changqi is indeed really obedient in front of junior brother Lin. I wonder what sort of techniques junior brother Lin had used. Elder Kui commented in bewilderment. They just couldn't figure it out for the lives of them. After a short observation, Grand Master Yan broke out of his invisibility. And just as the two men appeared, Lin Fan was taken aback. Grand Master, Lin Fan was still deep in his thoughts, contemplating on what he should do. Highs. Grand Master Yan sighed. As he looked at Mie Changqi, those serene eyes of his disciple were once again burning with hatred. Upon discovering the change, Lin Fan cleared his throat in displeasure. This sound made by Lin Fan was like thunder in the ears of Mie Changqi. In an instant, his attitude switched over immediately again. Looking at what was happening, Grand Master Yan felt somewhat awkward. To think that Mie Changqi harbored such hatred towards him. But the moment Lin Fan cleared his throat, his attitude had changed entirely. Indeed, this was his failure of a lifetime as a person. Grand Master, now that Mie Changqi is repentant for his mistakes, I reckon it's time we give him another chance. Lin Fan said. Looking first at Lin Fan, then at Mie Changqi, Grand Master Yan was filled with emotions. He was in part upset, in part heartbroken. He had suddenly realized what a failure of a master he had been. To think that he, as the Grand Master of Glory Sect, could not even redeem an influence over a disciple of his. Sigh. Alright, Chapter 165, Hang to Whack. Chapter 165, Hang to Whack. Lin Fan was exhilarated, to think that the Grand Master would agree. This meant that he could take Mie Changqi out of this place. With his skillful training methods, Mie Changqi had long been a tamed man. Lesser celestial upper level, what a splendid cultivation base this was. Even in the sect right now, he'd be quite an existence. Even though it was safe within the sect without having to fear of others bringing him harm, Lin Fan had some plans of his own. The Grand Master's benevolence has granted you a new chance at life. What are you waiting for? Lin Fan glared at Mie Changqi sternly. My utmost gratitude to the Grand Master for granting me this opportunity. Under the influence of Lin Fan's aura, Mie Changqi said obediently. But what Lin Fan did not understand was that the more obedient Mie Changqi was, the more heartbroken Grand Master Yan got. After all, this was a disciple he had once highly regarded and cared for. Now that things had come to this, who could understand the pain in his heart? Forget it, forget it. Grand Master Yan replied as though he had gotten over it and waved his hands. As he did so, an aura spread through the air. A series of snapping and cracking sounds came from Mie Changqi's body, as a powerful force emitted from him. The seal was released. By this point, Lin Fan was already extremely gleeful. However, Lin Fan did not feel anything much from the powerful force that was emitting from Mie Changqi's body. At the end of the day, you had still committed a heinous crime. From this day forth, you shall take on a new identity in the sect. Grand Master Yan took out a skin mask and continued, this is a tool which can alter your appearance. Standing by the side, Lin Fan was even more pleased. Not only had the Grand Master allowed Mie Changqi's release, he had even thought of the future. What a smooth transition of affairs. Grand Master, how about this? Let his new name be just Changqi. Lin Fan suggested. Grand Master Yan nodded in agreement. All right then, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Without waiting for Lin Fan's reply, Grand Master Yan turned around and walked away, as his body gradually disappeared into thin air. Looking at Grand Master Yan's back view, Lin Fan was filled with some questions. Grand Master Yan seemed somewhat sunken, somewhat unhappy. But he tossed the thoughts out of his head. What had that got to do with him? As long as he could take Mie Changqi out with him, nothing else mattered much anyways. Observing the scene, Elder Kui sighed, what the Grand Master is feeling, is heartbreak. How could Elder Kui not know what Grand Master Yan was thinking? Looking at the disciple he had once regarded so highly upon bark at him in defiance without any respect, but only to be obedient to someone else, it was akin to having one's own son call someone else daddy and disregarding him. Lin Fan looked at Elder Kui and shrugged his shoulders helplessly as well. He did not know what he could say. How could he tell Elder Kui that Mie Changqi's obedience was due to his efficient training methods? As Lin Fan arrived at Nameless Peak with Mie Changqi, Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju hurried to greet this newcomer. After using the mask given by the Grand Master, Mie Changqi's appearance had changed entirely. If not for the disguise, anyone who recognized him would be scared shitless at the sight of him roaming freely. This guy here will be your junior brother from henceforth, Lin Fan announced. Master, why does this junior brother give off such a grim mood as though he doesn't really like to talk? Observing his new junior brother silently, Zhang Ergo whispered to Lin Fan. But Zhang Ergo was naturally pleased to welcome a new junior brother. After all, as the big brother of Saint Devil sect, the more people he had under him, the more face he would have. Junior brother, what's your name? Feng Buju stepped forth and asked. Mie Changqi did not reply Feng Buju. All he took was a single glance at Feng Buju. He could not be bothered with someone whose cultivation base was this low compared to him. Being ignored by his new junior brother, Feng Buju could only shake his head awkwardly. He was helpless to this situation as well. Seemed like things were going to be tough getting along with this junior brother in the future. Where are your replies when your senior brothers asks questions? Lin Fan scolded firmly. The moment Lin Fan scolded, Mie Changqi's heart took a jolt. Senior brother, my name is Changqi. Please let me know if there is anything I can do for you in the future. His reply was instantaneous. How would he dare to put on any airs? Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. They did not understand how this guy turned so obedient the moment Lin Fan scolded him. Could it be that this junior brother had masochistic tendencies? Just then, Kaija Chao, who was sleeping within the house, caught sight of Lin Fan's return. She broke into a small run towards Lin Fan. With her bright eyes and gentle voice, she called out, Master. Lin Fan broke into a warm smile as he picked up Zhichao and carried her in his arms. Pointing at Mie Changqi, he went on, from now on, he will be your junior brother. Come, greet your senior sister. Senior sister. Mie Changqi greeted obediently. He was naturally pretty upset at calling a bloody young brat his senior sister, but he did not dare to voice out at all. Just one look at Lin Fan was enough to cause Mie Changqi to shudder. If Lin Fan were to roar at him, it would feel like the end of the world. Lin Fan knew that Mie Changqi was a stubborn man, so he felt the need to remind him of certain stuff. Remember, this is your senior sister. If you do not protect your senior sister, I will hang to whack you. Yes, Mie Changqi replied stutteringly. Hang to whack, reminded him of the scenario back in the room the other day. Horrifying, that was utterly horrifying, he did not want to experience that ever again. Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju looked at Mie Changqi and felt upset. How could he even enrage a man such as Master Lin, who was so nice? He must be some sort of a jerk. Master, what is hang to whack? Kai Zhichao asked with an innocent look on her face. Fondling his young disciple's head and smiling warmly, Lin Fan replied, you'll know in the future. Oh, okay, where is Tianyu? Lin Fan asked around. Master, senior brother Tianyu has been working hard on his cultivation. Zhang Ergo replied. Towards Tianyu, Lin Fan decided that it was about time to rein in the ropes. After all, he had cast the net out for long enough. It was time to bring in the catch. The two of you, bring your junior sister around Jialan Peak for a walk. Lin Fan handed Kai Zhichao over to Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju. After all, something big was about to happen. Now that he had finally trained a disciple with capable fighting strength, of course, he couldn't let this opportunity go waste. Otherwise, the heavens might strike him down for wasting chances. Yes, Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju nodded. Towards this junior sister of theirs, both of them had taken quite a liking as well. Especially so for Zhang Ergo, who had not a single woman taking a liking to him. This girl was godsent. No. This junior sister was the only girl who had bothered to give him any attention in this entire life of his. Even though she was a young kid, but a girl was a girl. Fair enough. You, come with me. Lin Fan looked at Mie Changqi and curled his pinky finger. Yes, master. Looking at Lin Fan's suspicious actions, Mie Changqi had butterflies in his stomach, afraid of what was about to come. Could it be that he was about to be hung to whack again? Translator's thoughts. Lamb. Goodness, Zhichao is really so cute. In any case, even though the translation does not show it, I would like to point out that the way Zhichao addresses Lin Fan is different from the way Zhang Ergo and the rest addresses him. While both call him as master, the words Zhichao uses are dearer and symbolizes a closer relationship. Whereas for Zhang Ergo and the rest, it is more of a formal relationship. Also, please do not mind the grammatical errors for hang to whack. It's meant to be just two words with somewhat of a pun meaning. Hence, it appeared that way haha. Cheers. Chapter 166, You. FC King. Kidding, me. Chapter 166, You. FC King. Kidding, me. Mie Changqi followed closely behind Lin Fan with his heart thumping furiously. The only things he felt were elements of fear and nervousness. What was Master going to do to him? He harbored intentions of running away. But the presence of Master's forceful aura melted away any courage he had. Mie Changqi had wanted to ask himself why he was this afraid of this man before him. But no matter how he racked his brains, he could not find an answer. On the other hand, Lin Fan was filled with excitement, as though he was anticipating something great to happen soon. Within the house, Lin Fan and Mie Changqi gazed at one another. Those all-seeing eyes filled with motives made Mie Changqi ever more nervous. Master, is there any issue? Mie Changqi asked carefully. Now that he was alone with Master in an enclosed space, his mind was only flooded with memories back in the locked cell. He did not ever want to go through the same experience ever. That shameful, tragic and horrifying experience. Never again. Come on, hit me. The moment Lin Fan opened his mouth, Mie Changqi was stunned. What? The FCK, hit me with 10% of your strength. Looking at Mie Changqi's stupefied expression, Lin Fan repeated once more. Now that he had a disciple with a lesser celestial upper-level cultivation base, naturally he had to make full use of this fella. Otherwise, he'd be a fool to let such a gem go to waste. No. At this point, Eternal Demon Body was hard leveling up anymore. Lin Fan was determined. He was not going to head down the peak until this boy leveled up his Eternal Demon Body. Master. No, I'm afraid. Mie Changqi quivered in fear. He did not dare to imagine how badly he would be hung to be whacked if he landed a punch on Master. Looking at Mie Changqi's cowardice, Lin Fan got frustrated. Standing up, he looked around the room, as though in search of something. Master, what are you looking for? A whip, obviously. If you don't whack me, I'll hang to whack you. Lin Fan replied coldly. No, I'll whack. Mie Changqi almost broke down at the words, hang to whack. Okay, hurry up. 10%. Lin Fan hurried him. With Mie Changqi's powers, 10% should be just right. If he ordered Mie Changqi to whack with full force, he himself might just die at Mie Changqi's hands. Mie Changqi was utterly confused at this point. He had seen all sorts of people, but this was the first time he saw someone who begged to be whacked. Against the master who had tortured and whipped him, to land a blow back at him. Mie Changqi could only swallow his courage and do as ordered. Come here. Lin Fan was ready. Whether or not, eternal demon body, could level up was up to this boy here. Master, here I come. Mie Changqi raised his hands and pushed his palms onto Lin Fan's chest. Looking at Mie Changqi's oncoming palms, Lin Fan was extremely gleeful and excited. Come on, let the waves of experience points flood yours truly. The palm came across like a dragon sieving through the seas, ferocious and domineering. While the speed was somewhat slow, Lin Fan could feel the energy behind the palm strike. Ding, eternal demon body experience points +10. Lin Fan smiled, awaiting his tidal waves of experience points. But these savage 10 points awarded nearly crushed Lin Fan's heart. Mie Changqi shirked his body timidly and continued to gently slap palm after palm on Lin Fan's chest. Ding, eternal demon body experience points +10. Initially ecstatic, Lin Fan was now squinting his eyes and glaring at Mie Changqi sternly. His intent to kill flooded the air. You, FC King, kidding, me. Lin Fan's voice was firm yet gentle, but this soft voice was enough to roar like thunder in Mie Changqi's ears. In this gentle aura emitted by Lin Fan, Mie Changqi could sense something else. It was danger. It was a feeling of dissatisfaction. Master, I was wrong. Please forgive me. For real now, 10%. That very second, an explosive force exploded from within Mie Changqi. The initially ordinary strike of Mie Changqi now landed on Lin Fan's chest after slicing through thin air. Just as Lin Fan was about to speak, the heavy strike landed on him, and he was knocked back flying. A spit of blood flew through the air. Ding, eternal demon body experience points +300,000. Master, looking at Lin Fan flying through the air, Mie Changqi was absolutely horrified. He had caused his master to bleed. What sort of cruel punishment awaits him after this? FCK. Lin Fan took a spin in midair and landed back gracefully, a wide smile on his face. Good, just like that, bring it on. Lin Fan could truly feel the experience points about to flood his world. Eternal demon body was definitely going to level up thanks to this boy. Towards Lin Fan's behavior, Mie Changqi couldn't help but shudder. What's up with Master? Why would he keep asking to be whacked? Furthermore, why does he look like he's enjoying this thoroughly? Unless, Mie Changqi did not dare to ponder any further. Everything seemed to be treading on danger grounds. But since Master asked for the beating, in order to please his master, he had to accede to the request. Master, be careful. Mie Changqi struck again. Ding, eternal demon body experience points +300,000. Hurry it up. Lin Fan steadied his body as he took in blow after blow. Yes, Mie Changqi raised his palms. After that, the only things which could be seen in the air were the shadows of Mie Changqi's swift motions. Lin Fan felt like he was in heaven. This feeling of pleasure came so quickly that he was hardly ready for it. Nameless peak. On the path up, the skies had turned gray. Junior sister, what were you talking about with Sister Yulan? Zhang Ergo asked. The only reason why Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju could enter Jialan Peak was due to Lin Fan. If not for him, the two of them would have long been tossed off the peak. Riding on Zhang Ergo's shoulders, the bright eyes of Kai Zhichao gleamed in the evening skies, nothing much. Sister Yulan said that senior brother is very handsome and she likes him a lot. The casual expression of Zhang Ergo took a change as he stopped on the spot. With a look of disbelief in his eyes which turned into happiness, he carried down his junior sister from his shoulders. Junior sister, is that true? Zhang Ergo could not believe that he could feel such happiness. Zhang Ergo had long harbored some feelings towards Yulan, but he too knew that he did not have what it took. So, he was just satisfied in being able to see her every now and then. The tender hands of Kaiser Chow reached into the small pouch she was hanging on her waist and took out something. It was a bronze mirror, given as a gift by the sisters of Jalan Peak. Senior brother, you can check it out yourself with this. Kaiser Chow stretched the mirror in front of Zhang Ergo. He did not understand, but still took hold of the mirror. Looking at it, he couldn't help but rub his chin. Indeed, I do look somewhat handsome, I suppose. Zhang Ergo muttered to himself confidently. Standing at the side, Feng Buju couldn't help but feel a sorry heartache in his heart. Kaiser Chow blinked her eyes and took back the bronze mirror before carefully placing it in her small little pouch. She then climbed back onto Zhang Ergo's shoulders. Junior sister, do you think I'm handsome? Zhang Ergo asked. I don't know, Kaiser Chow replied innocently. Translator's thoughts. Lam. Hey guys, if you guys remembered how people referred to Zhang Ergo as Brother Go. The same goes for Sister Yulan. It's a closer term used rather than a formal one. And I suppose that's what Kaiser Chow refers to them as, since she's still a young kid. Speaking of which, I would like to remind you guys again that. Goodness, this girl is cute. Ha ha ha. Chapter 167, Yet Another Sleepless Night. Chapter 167, Yet Another Sleepless Night. Ding, congratulations on leveling up Eternal Demon Body. Physical Body State, Paracelestial Middle Level. At the point of leveling, Lin Fan felt a wave of heat energy surge through his body. Eternal Demon Body was the upgraded version of Titanium Grade Demon Body, and it was the only defensive skill Lin Fan possessed as of now. His body glowed brightly, being much stronger than before. Mie Changqi, who was busy beating up Lin Fan fanatically, was shocked at what was happening as well. He too could feel the surge of energy being emitted from Lin Fan. 20% now. Lin Fan was extremely joyous. The best thing about having trained Mie Changqi under him was the fact that he was now able to make use of him as a free leveling up tool. Yes, Mie Changqi was no longer afraid of hurting Lin Fan as before. This man had something about him. Even a piece of steel would be smashed into smithereens with him smashing it repeatedly even with just 10% of strength. But yet, Master only grew more energetic the more he was hit. The only thought in Mie Changqi's heart was this: not only did Master enjoy torturing others, but he also enjoyed being tortured as well. But of course, he was not dumb enough to say this out loud. Else, he was sure he'd suffer an extremely terrible fate. Just then, Mie Changqi's aura increased as well, as he built up another 10% of his strength. With the throw of his fist, the air crackled with the force of his fist breaking through the thin air. When one was a lesser celestial upper-level being, one was able to break through the void easily. In that blow of his, the power of the void was added within his own aura, strengthening the force of the blow. Even though Mie Changqi had suppressed his full strength, the power of this fist was still not to be underestimated. Bam! A fist landed on Lin Fan's chest fiercely, echoing a loud thumping sound. Ding! Eternal Demon Body Experience Points plus 200,000. Not right. How could the experience points go down after Mie Changqi had increased his power level? Was this guy slacking off yet again? But looking at Mie Changqi's fearful eyes, he doubted that possibility. Could it be that after leveling up, even 20% strength was not enough to satiate Eternal Demon Body? That seemed like the only plausible explanation. Use 30%, Lin Fan ordered. Yes, Mie Changqi was unable to defy Lin Fan's wishes as he threw yet another heavy punch over. Ding! Eternal Demon Body Experience Points plus 300,000. Each time a fist landed, Lin Fan could feel the blood within his body vibrating tremendously. This was probably the max he could handle right now. But fair enough, there was no hurry. Slow as things might be, he was bound to level up eventually as well. Junior sister, what do you want to eat tonight? The meals of Nameless Peak were all prepared by Zhang Ergo usually. With the inclusion of this junior sister, especially one whom the great master Lin had taken such a liking to, naturally he had to take good care of her. And what was more important was the fact that whether or not he could continue heading to Jalan Peak depended on her. Where is this loud thumping sound coming from? Zhang Ergo frowned as he could not find the source of it. It sounds like it's coming from Master's side. Feng Buju replied. Perhaps Master is just cultivating his pills. Zhang Ergo could not figure out what the sound was. But he supposed that it could be from Master Lin's pill cultivation process. Senior brother, I want to take a look. Kaiser Chow, who was on Zhang Ergo's shoulders, voiced out. When she had just left Sky City, Kaiser Chow would still cry and throw tantrums occasionally. But after Lin Fan and the rest's patient care and communication with her, they eventually helped this young kid accommodate to this place. By the looks of it, if she were to stay here for a couple of years, or even tens of years, she might eventually forget about the Kai family. Senior brother, I don't think that's such a good idea. If Master were to find out. Feng Buju commented from the side. If Master were to find them sneaking around, they'd be in for a rough time. Zhang Ergo was undecided at first. But after looking at his junior sister's look of anticipation, he relented. It was a give-and-take situation. After all, if he were to displease her, it would threaten his future at Jalan Peak. We'll just take a quick peek, and no one is to make a sound. Zhang Ergo said determinedly. Senior brother is the best. Zhichao will not make a single peep. Kai Zhichao opened her eyes widely. Alright, then we'll just take a quick look. Shiftily and sneakily, the three of them made their way over to Master Lin's place. They crouched down in a corner and peeked in through a gap. When Zhang Ergo and the rest caught sight of what was happening inside, their originally curious faces turned into looks of dumbfoundedness. The master, who was so revered and so admirable in their eyes. How could this be happening? Yes, not bad, more. Lin Fan was thoroughly enjoying the increment of his experience points with his eyes closed. This feeling was simply fabulous. The look of ecstasy on Lin Fan's face was the scariest thing to Zhang Ergo and those peeping outside. Could it be that Master had such fetishes? Suddenly, Zhang Ergo's face turned into one filled with fear. If Master were to catch them peeping like this, especially at such a sight of his new disciple doing this to him, they'd all be dead meat. No, the thought of the consequences was simply horrifying. Senior brother, what is Master doing? Kai Zhichao asked inquisitively. Shish, lower your volume. Goosebumps raised all over Zhang Ergo's body. Even though Kai Zhichao's voice was not loud, it was crisp and clear. While Lin Fan, who was immersed in his experience points farming, did not realize the presence of anybody outside, the soft voice of Kai Zhichao did float into his ears. Lin Fan's expression changed slightly. Why the FCK was anybody peeping from the outside? But by the sounds of it, it should be that young disciple of his. Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju must definitely be around as well, which meant that they must have caught sight of his pleasured face while being walloped. As the sixth Grand Master of Saint Devil Sect, how could he let his image be destroyed in the eyes of his disciples? Deep in his thoughts, Lin Fan had a spark come to him. Throwing out his palm, he landed a strike on Mie Changqi's chest. Flicking his robes, he opened his eyes with a calm and firm look. That fist technique you just used did not have enough strength. It was full of gaps. You need to continue working on it. He then looked at the door and said softly, you guys. Enter. Zhang Ergo and Feng Buju looked at each other helplessly. At the end of the day, they were still discovered. Master, what are you doing? Kai Zhichao's little frame hopped over the door sill and ran towards Lin Fan, her head raised and looking at Lin Fan with an innocent expression. Lin Fan smiled gently and fondled her little head. Without a change in his expression, he continued, Master was teaching your junior brother some martial arts. You're back so early today. Kai Zhichao nodded her head as though she understood what Lin Fan had just said and went on, Nope, Master. It ain't early anymore. The skies are already dark. Lin Fan was stunned as he looked outside at the pitch-black skies. He had not realized that time had passed so quickly. Changqi, this palm technique of yours, you still need quite a bit of working on. Stay here and carry on practicing through the night. I'll train you up well. Lin Fan ordered. Yes. Mie Changqi did not dare to say anything more. But those helpless eyes of his seemed to be welling up with tears as he had an urge to cry. Seemed like it was going to be yet another tortuous and sleepless night. Translator's thoughts. Lam. Hi guys, please pardon any grammatical or verbal errors for the next few chapters. Running a fever and cough right now. Cheers. Chapter 168, Touched to Tears. Chapter 168, Touched to Tears. As their master, naturally his words were law to them. Thankfully, Lin Fan's brain was sharp enough for him to come up with an excuse quickly. Looking at their odd faces, Lin Fan couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He could turn any situation from dirt to gold in his hands, and he had never ever lost face because of any misunderstandings so far. After Zhang Ergo prepared the food and everyone had their fill, Lin Fan had them all return to their houses to rest. At the same time, he thought of what a responsible master he was to burn the midnight oil so that his disciple could level him up. Back in the house, silently, Mie Changqi was extremely nervous. It wasn't because Master looked scary, but the very idea of being alone with Master always had him on his toes. Lin Fan looked at Mie Changqi and smiled. The more he looked, the more he liked this guy. If he were to recruit disciples in the future, they had better be of similar standards as him as well. Alright, continue. Lin Fan waved to Mie Changqi. If he did not utilize Mie Changqi's potential to the max, then what sort of a failure would he be as a master? Bam, bam, ding, eternal demon body experience points plus 300,000. Ding, eternal demon body experience points plus 300,000. Experiencing the massive and rapid gains in experience, Lin Fan's heart bloomed like a flower. In Lin Fan's eyes, fighting strength was only one factor, and not the most important one. The most crucial point was being able to stay alive. In layman's terms, even the strongest bodybuilder was afraid of a gun. Same went for martial artists. Even if one were the strongest ever, there would still be times where one would let his guard down. As long as he could upgrade his body to one which was indestructible and impenetrable, that was the safest way to go about it. Mie Changqi was getting somewhat tired. He had been raising his fists and striking non-stop for the entire day. Every time he tried to stop, he would be scolded by Master for slowing down the pace. Even though he was a lesser celestial upper-level being, he was a human nevertheless, and needed rest as well. But looking at Master's insatiable look on his face, no matter how tired Mie Changqi was, he dared not give it a rest. If he were to get on the wrong side of Master, he would definitely be in for a rough one. And just like that, time passed. Lin Fan laid down on the ground to rest, back facing up. Come, continue landing blows on my back while I take a rest. Once I wake up, you can then go and have a break. Lin Fan ordered. Mie Changqi looked at his master with pitiful eyes, as though begging Master to let him off. Lin Fan took a look at Mie Changqi. Even though he had trained this guy well, he was not someone devoid of emotions after all. Sitting up, Lin Fan took a deep breath and looked at Mie Changqi with a deep, concerned look. Patting his shoulders, he continued, Changqi, Changqi. You have to understand that it's all for your own good. When the heavens bless you with such superior powers, you have way more responsibilities than most humans. Yours truly is trying to build up your character and perseverance. You have to understand that Saint Devil sect cannot do without successors. While your seniority may be low today, yours truly has high hopes for you. Master, even though Mie Changqi had been trained well by Lin Fan with the seed of fear planted deep within his heart, he still had other emotions like any other human beings. He too yearned for affection, thoughtfulness, care, and concern from others. Lin Fan's words seeped deep within his heart, and he was deeply touched by Lin Fan's thoughtfulness, as tears brimmed in his eyes. Changqi, so don't blame yours truly for being harsh on you. After all, it ain't easy to be a successor. You have to convert these feelings into motivation for you to push even further and higher for your own character building and cultivation base. Do you understand? Lin Fan carried on. Yes. Mie Changqi nodded repeatedly. That's good, that's good. As long as you do, yours truly is heartened. Lin Fan too was feeling tired. After all, now that he was feeding so many mouths in the sect, he needed to shower each of these children with care and concern from time to time. But at the end of the day, it was all worth it. After all, it was only his own fault for being such a respectable man. Carry on then. Lin Fan waved his hands and laid down once more, falling into slumber. As to whether Mie Changqi had newfound motivation, Lin Fan need not worry anymore. After all, no one could escape from his sweet nothings. They just had no idea how many times he had repeated the same words to everyone else. ... Looking at his master fall into slumber, Mie Changqi's initial restlessness and despair were all converted to newfound strength. Lin Fan's words had thoroughly cleared up the drought in Mie Changqi's heart, and he was now a new fountain of energy. Master, I will not let you down. Mie Changqi's lifeless eyes were revitalized once more. Bam, ding, eternal demon body experience points plus 300,000. Ding, eternal demon body experience points plus 300,000. ... Zhang Ergo and the rest were finding it difficult to fall asleep. After all, the thumping sounds continued from over Master's place, as if something was being rammed. Deep, solid, continuous thumping. There's no way I can sleep like this. Zhang Ergo sat up and stared over at Master's house. Eventually, he deferred thoughts of wanting to kill his master for it and sat down cross-legged, entering cultivation state. Even though Zhang Ergo had been on Nameless Peak for quite some time, his cultivation base had yet to increase. But with Lin Fan's help, his innate potential and wisdom had gone through a tremendous change. he was definitely much stronger than before. Entering cultivation, Zhang Ergo could feel a solid energy coursing through his blood veins all around his body. Post-celestial cultivation was something he could enter anytime he was ready. But he obeyed his master's words to not rush head-on into it. He was to build up his foundation properly first before he broke through to post-celestial level. To Zhang Ergo, it was every single bit of luck in his lifetime to be able to meet Lin Fan. Zhang Ergo's innate talent was actually just like shit. No matter how much effort he put into train or cultivate, he would definitely never be able to reach anywhere if he had not met someone like Lin Fan. After meeting Lin Fan, now that his potential and wisdom had improved tremendously, it was like setting a strong foundation within himself. From here on, at the very least, he would not lose out to anyone else if he continued training hard. That night, Kaiser Chao was the only one who was able to fall asleep on Nameless Peak. Zhang Ergo, Feng Buju and Tianyu were all kept awake by the solid thumping noise. They had no idea what master was up to training this new junior brother this late at night. Couldn't it wait till the day? Next day, Lin Fan opened his eyes gently. What a good night's rest it was, and he fell asleep all the way. The moment he opened his eyes, he could feel blows continue raining upon his back. Ding! Eternal Demon Body Experience Points +1. When Lin Fan heard this from the system, he panicked momentarily. What was up with this? Why was it only 1 experience point? But upon checking the panel, Lin Fan understood. Eternal Demon Body had leveled up, but he did not realize while he was deep in his slumber. Physical Body State, Paracelestial Upper Level. When he took a look at Mie Changqi, he could not help but let out a sigh. Indeed, what a silly boy he was. He was thoroughly out of energy, with his eyes sunken haggardly. Head back to rest. We'll continue tonight. Lin Fan waved his hands. Yes. Chapter 169. One can only be strong if one can endure loneliness. Chapter 169. One can only be strong if one can endure loneliness. In the span of half a month, Lin Fan had barely left Nameless Peak. By his side was Mie Changqi, who was leveling up Lin Fan's eternal demon body relentlessly. At the same time, Zhang Ergo and the rest of the disciples could hardly fall asleep at night due to the constant thumping. So, they took the spare time to cultivate more. As such, their cultivation bases had improved significantly as well, especially for Zhang Ergo, who had chosen to not break through and stay within the precelestial level. His energy was firm and culminated. His blood moved easily with every breath he took, like a volcano awaiting eruption. But as time passed, Zhang Ergo and the rest made careful and wary suggestions to Lin Fan regarding his night training. After all, it was fine for a couple of days. But for an extended period, it was pretty tiring to endure. Looking at their pitiful and haggard faces, Lin Fan relented with the night training. After all, he was a loving master who did not live solely to torture his disciples. Huff! Lin Fan breathed out deeply. Within his body, energy circulated like a powerful dragon coursing through his veins to every part of his body. Ding! Congratulations on leveling Eternal Demon Body. Physical Body State, Lesser Celestial Upper Level. Looking at the figures on the panel of the system, Lin Fan smiled. This was the result of the hard work of the past half a month. Now that his body state was that of a lesser celestial upper level, next up would be full cultivation state. Actually, just this body alone was unparalleled within the entire sect. Other than the Grand Master and senior elders, who could ever break his defense? But looking at the huge experience points required for the next level of Eternal Demon Body, Lin Fan's heart took a leap as well. Vicious. This was way too vicious. If he did not have a dedicated professional feeding him experience points, it was definitely going to be hard leveling up from here on. But as it stood, Lin Fan was still pretty satisfied. To any martial artist, attaining such a body was still a pretty satisfying thing to have. Even though Mie Changqi was a lesser celestial upper level being, his physical body state was far lower than the state Lin Fan was at currently. But even so, when his cultivation base was sealed up, he could only depend on the toughness of his body to get through the years in the punishment hall. As of today, Mie Changqi's fists no longer had much of an impact on Lin Fan's body. Lin Fan was very grateful for this. If not for Mie Changqi, he would have spent dozens of donkey years and not even then attained this level of physical body state. Ah, Changqi, you have finally passed the trial of yours truly. From this day on, you're free to do what you want and no longer have to report to my place daily. Lin Fan looked at the haggard Mie Changqi and commented. When Mie Changqi heard these words, those sunken eyelids of his opened immediately with a face of excitement. Even though this was a test set for him by the master, he too was tired after the course of half a month. If not for his sheer willpower to just carry on, Mie Changqi would have broken down mentally a long time ago. Repeating the same actions every single day. Anyone would go insane doing it. Master, can I? Mie Changqi asked in disbelief. Yes, you can, Lin Fan chuckled. In the past half a month, Mie Changqi was not the only one tired. Lin Fan too was pretty burnt out. After all, sitting there to be whacked every day was not something the average man could endure either. If not for his sheer willpower to raise the level of eternal demon body, Lin Fan too would have collapsed mentally long ago. Then your disciple will take his leave. Mie Changqi greeted politely. To him, the most important thing now was to catch a well-deserved break. He no longer wanted to open his eyes anymore. Even though he could get to rest every night, the moment he closed his eyes, he was filled with visions of his fists. A few thousand miles away, a gigantic ark was floating in the skies and rushing towards Glory Sect. This ark was bigger and more majestic than the one Glory Sect had deployed for the previous expedition. A red flag hung in the middle of the ark as the disciples on the ark surveyed the grounds below. Elder, we are only a few thousand miles away from Glory Sect now. We should be able to arrive by noon. A disciple greeted an old man courteously. The elder's face was calm and expressionless as he gazed into the distant skies, those eyes seemingly able to pierce through anything. Nameless Peak. Lin Fan was filled with excitement. After half a month of not leaving the peak, he wondered if his young junior disciples below missed him. The point where Nameless Peak started growing was due to the cultivating of pills. But in this half a month of training, Lin Fan had not cultivated pills for anyone. And after the previous incident, Danding Peak too had gotten their shit together. Their pill efficiency had gotten much higher compared to before. While still incomparable to Lin Fan, at least there were some decent results, and the outer sect disciples were no longer exploited as before. Since Lin Fan had stopped cultivating pills for the time being, some of the disciples headed up to Danding Peak to check out what the situation was around there right now. And what they found out was that compared to before, Danding Peak had undergone a thorough transformation. Danding Peak disciples were no longer haughty or arrogant. Coupled with the improvement in efficiency yield, the disciples slowly began to regain some trust in Danding Peak. And so, even though Junior Master Lin had stopped cultivating pills, his image in their hearts have never changed. After all, they all knew that he was the only reason why Danding Peak had undergone this change for them. Lin Fan walked through the outer sect disciples' quarters. After a period of not seeing him, all the outer sect disciples greeted him exuberantly. Lin Fan nodded his head in return to their greetings. But he was puzzled over something. Why did all of them look so busy? Is something happening? Why do you guys look so busy? Lin Fan asked curiously. An outer sect disciple looked at Lin Fan and took a deep breath. Junior Master Lin, the men from Jushao sect are about to arrive today. We're all getting busy to prepare for the banquet. Jushao sect. This was the first time Lin Fan had heard of such a sect. What's up with this Jushao sect? Do they have some sort of relationship with this Glory sect? Yes, Junior Master Lin. Jushao sect resides at the extreme western lands and is far away from Glory sect. Every 3 years, we will have an exchange of sorts. That is, we will pick out our most excellent geniuses from each side to take part in a series of sparring. This tradition has been going on for thousands of years, and it is always very grandiose. The outer sect disciple laughed as though this was the happiest period of time they had always been waiting for. Lin Fan nodded, somewhat excited. To think that Glory sect had such events lined up as well. Strongest genius disciple. After pondering for a moment, Lin Fan continued forward, wondering if he would be allowed to partake in the sparrings. But if he were to take part, wouldn't he be accused of bullying the young ones? After all, he was the 6th master of Saint Devil sect. But if he was to not take part, then they should at least save him a seat at the table of judges. Chapter 170. One must not be too cocky in life. Chapter 170. One must not be too cocky in life. Entering the inner sect disciples' quarters, Lin Fan found that it was much quieter, unlike the bustle out at the outer sect quarters. Some disciples could be seen working hard at cultivating on top of peaks or at the bases of waterfalls. Looking at these diligent disciples, Lin Fan did not head forth to disturb them. As Lin Fan headed towards the peak of the Grand Master, he was greeted by the sight of Zong Henshin. Junior Master Lin. Catching sight of Junior Master Lin, Zong Henshin broke into a smile. He had not seen Junior Master Lin ever since the expedition had ended. Junior disciple, looking at your relaxed demeanor, I suppose you have quite a bit of confidence in the sparring of the geniuses. Lin Fan chuckled. Zong Henshin smiled awkwardly, Haha, don't tease me, Junior Master. It's because I have no confidence that I'm out here taking a walk to calm my mood. How could you have no confidence when the sparring had yet to start? It's true, Junior Master. I truly am lacking in confidence. Zhang Henshin was under immense pressure. For the sparring event, he was the hope of many junior brothers to perform well. But Zhang Henshin clearly knew that he was not in the least bit confident or ready for this sparring. He had partaken in the sparring 3 years ago, and he was utterly toyed with and dangled like a puppet by the genius of Jushao sect. Even though he had trained fervently for these 3 years and had grown tremendously, he was still unable to claim that he'd take victory in it. As long as you try your best. But yes, right, could you explain to yours truly what's the whole thing about this sparring between the geniuses? Lin Fan walked with Zhang Henshin to a bench, and sat down to chat. Well, Junior Master Lin, this goes way back. It started 3,000 years ago. Back then, Jushao sect and Glory sect were bonded to the point of life and death. When our ancestors were still disciples themselves, they got to know one another through a Forbidden Ground expedition, and grew to be really close from there on. However, they once got into an argument over whose sect had stronger disciples. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they settled with this series of sparring, and it has lasted to this day. So, does anyone get any prize of any sorts for winning this? Nopes. Zhang Henshin shook his head. Lin Fan was stunned momentarily. Why were these guys trying so hard for something without a prize? He shook his head. Then, what's the meaning of all this? Where do our disciples get their motivation from without any prizes? Listening to Lin Fan's question, Zhang Henshin shook his head fervently to correct him. That's not it, Junior Master. While there's no prize, this is an extremely important event for the sect. Therefore, we must not lose. Looking at Zhang Henshin's determined face, Lin Fan could only shake his head helplessly. Seemed like this sparring was all just a pointless argument by some old fogies years ago. To think that it had lasted to this day. What a chore. All right then, give it your best. I've got high hopes for you. Lin Fan patted Zhang Henshin on the shoulders and stood up, preparing to leave. Yes, Junior Master, that's all I can do as well. Afternoon, a gigantic arc appeared above the skies of Glory sect. Glory sect disciples who caught sight of the arc below were all deep within their own discussions. While this may be the first time some of the disciples had caught sight of Jushao sect, the rest who had taken part in the sparring every 3 years just found these guys to be a nuisance. Standing amongst the crowd, Lin Fan couldn't help but sigh as well. Whoever said that no sect would keep up with their reputation was definitely wrong. Just look at these guys. Their arc was tens of times larger than Glory sect's. If Glory sect's arc were to float up there side by side, it'd be like a parent and its child. This time round, the person in charge of welcoming them was Senior Elder Wuya. Long time no see, Wuya. Seems like Glory sect's grounds have been getting smaller in size, hasn't it? There's hardly even any room for us to park our ark anymore. On the ark, an old man with a long white beard chuckled. Looking at the situation, Lin Fan couldn't help but wonder. What a cocky old man. The first words he said were already so daring. Long time no see too, Brother Yichu. You seem like you've aged considerably as well. Well, since you're here, how about you come on down and we can catch up? Senior Elder Wuya shook his head gently and smiled calmly. All right. Senior Elder Liang Yichu of Jushao sect swept back his white robes and swiftly floated down in front of Senior Elder Wuya. This was the first time Lin Fan could clearly make out the appearance of this guy. Neither tall nor bulky, he was somewhat stumpy with a rotund face. With a big belly in front of him, he seemed like he was kind of pregnant as well. As the senior elders exchanged glances, their looks seemed to be filled with 1,000 emotions. After a long stare, the both of them hugged each other and gave out a hearty laugh, as though they had been through thick and thin. Glory sect and Jushao sect went way back. Since their ancestors made friends 3,000 years ago, naturally they had got a pretty sturdy relationship over all these years. But this was only true for those of the previous generation. Somehow, the feeling was somewhat different for the current generation. All right, come on down. Liang Yichu beckoned at the ark. It grew smaller, and his disciples descended down as well one by one. Each of them looked high and mighty, and glanced at Glory sect with sharp eyes. Brother Wuya, what do you think of this? Liang Yichu smiled and laughed. Towards this generation's disciples, he was pretty pleased with their growth and powers. Now that he brought them over to Glory sect, naturally he had to show them off as well. Senior Elder Wuya took a quick glance and stroked his beard without saying anything for a long time. Finally, he replied laughingly, not bad, not bad. There are quite a few good seeds over here. Brother Wuya, isn't that not too generous? I'm sure they're pretty much better than just a few good seeds. Senior Elder Wuya chuckled and did not reply. He did feel somewhat uncomfortable within his heart. Indeed, he couldn't deny that some of these disciples were pretty extraordinary. But compared to Mie Changqi of 3 years ago, they were far from him. Just that Mie Changqi, sigh. Lin Fan looked at the numerous disciples and couldn't help but sigh as well. Indeed, these guys were pretty something. But what the hell was wrong with them? Each and every one of them stood with their noses facing the skies, as though they owned the place. Furthermore, their hands were all placed behind their backs, exuding authority and arrogance. That haughty demeanor of theirs made anyone who looked at them want to give them a thorough whacking. The surrounding Glory Sect disciples were deep in gossip as well. Look at that guy's gaze. Goodness, how I wish I can throw a punch at him. Right, and the other guy too. He looks as though Glory Sect is nothing much to him. Bloody hell. HMPH, let them continue to put on airs for now. When the genius sparring begins, I'm sure our senior brothers from the inner sect would put them in their place. Brother Wuya, let me introduce you to my own personal disciple. Xinfeng, come over and greet Senior Wuya. Liang Yichu shouted to a disciple behind him. From the front row of the Jushao sect disciples, a jade-faced disciple, who looked extremely elegant, headed forth. Even though every step of his was slow, he was in front of Liang Yichu in an instant. Shrinking distances instantaneously, that was an extremely high-level skill. Xinfeng, greet Senior Wuya. Xinfeng looked at Senior Elder Wuya and nodded his head, passing that off as a greeting. My apologies, Brother Wuya. His temperament has been as such no matter how much I've been trying to change him. Liang Yichu laughed gently, but his meaning was clear, so what if my disciple is arrogant? That's the way it is. Senior Elder Wuya shook his head and laughed. He did not put the incident in his heart at all. But on the other hand, Lin Fan, who had witnessed the entire incident, felt like a pack of horses had stampeded over his heart. What the hell, how could this fella be even cockier than him? This guy needed to be taught a lesson. He needed to understand that one must not be too cocky in life. Translator's thoughts. Lamb. Hi guys, there's a portion which I'm completely unable to translate out. Now, the last sentence is one must not be too cocky in life. In Chinese, too cocky can be used in a slang way as Xinfeng as well, which is the guy's name. So there you have it, haha. Cheers. Chapter 171, You're wrong. Chapter 171, You're wrong. Liang Yichu had spent a ton of effort in grooming this disciple of his. To him, this guy's innate potential was comparable to that of Jushao sect's ancestor. Now that he had brought him out, especially in front of an old friend, he had to naturally flaunt this disciple of his even more. Brother Wuya, how are the geniuses of Glory Sect doing? Where's that Mie Changqi guy? 3 years ago, my disciple had forced himself into a retreat to reach a higher cultivation base. Hence, he missed out on the sparring. I would love to have him match up with Mie Changqi for a bit. Liang Yichu rubbed his belly while laughing. Upon hearing this, Senior Elder Wuya was somewhat displeased as well. Ah, Brother Yichu. Why do I get the feeling that you're out to bicker with me? How could Senior Elder Wuya not know what sort of character his old friend was? 3 years ago, Mie Changqi had defeated Jushao sect's disciples with ruthless methods, entirely throwing Jushao sect's face. By the looks of it, Jushao sect had prepared themselves thoroughly to reclaim victory once more. Ah, don't think that way, Brother Wuya. After all, we've got over 100 years of ties. How could I be so rude as to bicker with you? Given our close relationship, I'm just trying to show some concern. Liang Yichu smoked out as though every word was the truth. Wuya scanned the surrounding Glory Sect disciples. Indeed, he could not find someone who was more capable than the other party's genius. The moment Wuya caught sight of this disciple of Liang Yichu, he knew clearly in his heart that if there were no accidents, this Xinfeng would probably take the crown for this year's sparring. Just then, Wuya's gaze fell upon Lin Fan. This fella had always been mysterious. Even the lesser celestial upper-level snow lion was defeated by him. He must have plenty of tricks up his sleeves. Now that the sect's reputation was at stake, as a disciple of the sect, he naturally had an obligation to stand up for the sect. Furthermore, the look of arrogance on Liang Yichu's face was something Wuya could not stand. Since this guy couldn't defeat Wuya himself, he was banking on his disciple to earn him back some face. How could Wuya let this happen that easily? Wuya's calm face let out a smile. Since Brother Yichu is so eager, then let me introduce to you one of our sect's geniuses. Lin Fan, come and greet your senior. Standing at his original position, Lin Fan was initially deep in his thoughts. He was still contemplating on how to get at this Xinfeng guy. This guy whose nose was pointing above everyone else haughtily, who did not bother to look at anyone in the eyes. What a cocky fella, those arrogant eyes of his made anyone want to give him a good punching. But upon hearing Elder Wu Ye call himself, Lin Fan momentarily felt a life-threatening danger. A surge of energy rose through his heart at the same time. To be remembered by the Elder in times of glory sect's needs, it must mean that he held a certain degree of impression within their hearts. Raising his head, Lin Fan was determined to be even cockier than Xinfeng. His head was raised so high he was no longer even looking ahead. He was just looking straight up at the clear blue skies. Putting his hands behind his back, he strut forwards as well. He took every step slowly. To create a further lasting impression, he toggled, stealth, on and off, flickering his presence every now and then. Every disciple of Glory Sect was now in an exuberant mood. They were already deeply attracted by Junior Master Lin's suaveness. Whispers started flying around. How could Junior Master Lin be so imposing as a man? I can't take it anymore, it's making me blind. Junior Master Lin's demeanor is way too dazzling. Every step he takes, it's sending off a repressing aura. I can't take it any longer. HMPH. That's what I said. That's all the Jushao sect's genius can pull off. In front of Junior Master Lin, he's squash. Looking at Lin Fan's display of attitude, Wu Ye was lost for words as well within his heart. But his face let out a gentle smile in acknowledgement of Lin Fan. Indeed, what Glory Sect was lacking was a disciple as such who could bring up the morale like this with such grandeur within him. Those slow, shifting steps of his. That flashing, intermittent image of his. That raised, arrogant head of his. Each of those points symbolized Glory Sect's very dignity. Elder, Lin Fan said as he arrived beside Wu Ye. Yes, greet Senior Liang here. Senior Liang is yours truly's long-sworn friend. Lin Fan lowered his head ever slightly. But since he had pulled it so far back initially, he still had to lower his gaze all the way down before he could make out a single strand of hair on Liang Yichu's head. Lin Fan did not snort like Xinfeng. To him, that would diminish his ability to show off his unique style as a person. Sniff, sniff. Lin Fan's nose trembled as he gave off 2 sniffs. That should suffice as a greeting. Wu Ye looked at Lin Fan. The more he looked, the more he was fond of this man before him. He then continued apologetically, my apologies, Brother Liang. His temperament has been as such no matter how much I've been trying to change him. Please don't take it to heart. Liang Yichu looked at Wu Ye, then squinted at Lin Fan, somewhat displeased. This disciple here was indeed bloody cocky. Xinfeng too frowned and glared at Lin Fan, unhappy as well. To think that this guy was even cockier than him. Unless, was this guy somehow even stronger than him? The disciples of Jushao sect stared at Lin Fan, annoyed as well. How impudent could this guy get? Facing all of them with only his 2 nostrils, wasn't that way too much? Everyone took extra notice to burn the face of this man into their memories. During the sparring, they must let him understand what the consequences of being way too impudent were. Haha, Brother Wu Ye, quite something ain't he, this disciple of yours? But his cultivation base seems to be. Liang Yichu laughed as he stared at this disciple. He could not sense any flow of true energy within his body, nor could he tell what his cultivation base was. He could not figure out what method this disciple used to hide away his cultivation base from his very eyes. In the end, he concluded that this guy did not have any cultivation base at all. How could Wu Ye not understand this fatty's meaning? But at times, Wu Ye wondered as well. Just what was up with Lin Fan? There was not a single trace of energy coming out from him. Even the Grand Master himself could not make out what this man's cultivation base was. He was indeed pretty strange. Let me ask you then, Elder Liang. What is the purpose of us training up our cultivation bases? Lin Fan said gently, referring to himself. What an interesting disciple you have, Brother Wu Ye, to think that he's testing me out. But fair enough. In the presence of so many young ones, let me share some knowledge as a senior. The purpose of us training up our cultivation bases. Of course, it is so that we can transcend everything before us, and conquer everything between heaven and earth. Only as such can we attain eternal freedom as humans, the freedom to do anything we wish to. Liang Yichu's face was smiling with confidence in every word he spoke. He had to give these young ones a good lesson about why they had to work hard to build up their cultivation bases. How? Liang Yichu laughed and asked. Listening to their elder's explanation, all the disciples of Jushao sect nodded in agreement, doused in the wisdom of their elder. Even some disciples of Glory sect nodded their heads as well. What he said made sense, to transcend everything before them. But at that moment, Lin Fan stared straight at the man before him. An aura of dominance exuded from him as he spoke in a deep and low voice, "You're wrong. That is not our purpose for cultivating ourselves." The moment Lin Fan's words left his mouth, there was an outrage within the crowd. Every single disciple of Jushao sect gripped their fists tightly. This guy. How could he be so bloody overbearing? Damn it. God damn it. Chapter 172. Dare to receive a brick from me. Chapter 172. Dare to receive a brick from me. Transcend everything. Conquer everything freely. Eternal freedom. Who can easily claim eternity as eternity or freedom as freedom? In Glory sect's grand history of tens of thousands of years, we have tons of ancestors above us. Which of them could have claimed eternal freedom? Elder Liang, could you claim to live on for eternity? If so, why do we cultivate ourselves then? Of course, it's to push the limits of our body. To be able to repay gratitude and seek vengeance for ourselves as and when required, to protect anybody who we care about. Your freedom is gone the moment you enter a sect. However, no matter if you're a genius or a servant disciple, you're still a part of the sect. If the sect is strong, you're strong. If the sect dies, you die. As a member of the sect, you then have you use your life's efforts to glorify the sect. What sort of freedom were you talking about then? Lin Fan just smoked as hard as he could. It didn't matter if anyone understood a word. The most important thing was to first have the other party be at a loss for words. Of course, Lin Fan agreed with what he said about eternity and freedom whatsoever. If one didn't seek out those things while cultivating, what the FCK else would they seek out? But since this old fella was being so cocky, he naturally had to disagree for the sake of disagreeing. Even though this might irk the old man, Lin Fan could not care less. After all, he was a disciple of Glory sect, not Jushao sect. It wasn't like the old man could make things difficult for him anyway. Bravo! Junior Master Lin's speech is the best. That's right, Junior Master Lin. It's to protect people and things we care about. Since my cultivation base isn't that high anyways, how can I ever attain eternal freedom anyways? Even though the Glory sect disciples were on Junior Master Lin's side to begin with, his words still gave them a big morale boost within their hearts nevertheless. It was especially true for some of the disciples who had low potential and could never level up their cultivation bases even after diligent hard work. Eternal freedom was just a fool's dream. But through Lin Fan's words, they now had a newfound goal in life, to glorify the sect. Naturally, as disciples, the only way the sect could make it big was through their efforts and dedication in building it up. Liang Yichu too was dumbfounded by Lin Fan's speech. To be at a loss for words after this junior's rebuttal. Especially what he said about, could you claim to live on for eternity, he could not find a way to answer that. Throughout the long history of Jushao sect and its ancestors, which of them could claim to be capable of doing that? Truly none. Could he do the same? To gain eternal freedom? Of course, he couldn't. It was a fool's dream. Even if he wanted to get back some face, he could not claim eternal freedom. Sigh, mere mortals would think that being able to cultivate is a good thing. But little do they know that it is a never-ending abyss. Nothing as simple as they would expect. Lin Fan continued while he shook his head like an old soul. This act was blown right through the skies at this moment. Even Wu Yu looked at Lin Fan in surprise. To think that this fella could come up with such a speech of such quality. Furthermore, the logic was somewhat sound as well. HMPH. Just then, a sharp and violent sword will erupted through the air. Ving. A long sword appeared out of thin air and the luminous edge seemed to rip through the thin air. The air it passed by was vibrating, as though it would be ripped apart at any moment. The worth of creatures is determined by the heavens, as the strong devour the weak. Only the weak constantly seek excuses to escape from everything. The strong remain resolute within their hearts. Thus, eternal freedom is the highest state one could ever hope to achieve. To live a life without regrets, even if one were to fail, at least they would live up to their conscience. Do you dare to receive a sword from me? The sword stopped on Xinfeng's hand as he pointed it at Lin Fan. Do you dare to receive a sword from me? Xinfeng asked coldly. He was thoroughly incensed in his heart. Not only was this guy cockier than him, he even caused Elder Liang to be speechless in front of such a large crowd. As a genius of Jushao sect, he had an obligation to win back some face for his sect. He would use his strongest sword will to let this man understand the disparity in power levels. He would be made to realize that no matter how sound his logic was, he would still bend and kneel down in the face of absolute power. Liang Yichu was actually gloating within his heart, but none of that showed on his expressionless face as he commented, "Dear disciple, how could you behave as such? If you were to give these glory sect disciples a shock, then you'd be committing a grave mistake." Xinfeng did not waver from his mentor's words as his gaze was still fixated on Lin Fan. After following Elder Liang for tens of years, he already knew the hidden meaning behind his words. While in the open, he asked Xinfeng to keep his blade. His actual meaning was closer to this: let loose. Show them your true strength. Some of the disciples of Glory sect with lower cultivation bases were pale, and their foreheads were filled with beads of sweat under this repressive aura of Xinfeng. It was as though a gigantic Buddha statue was crushing down on their soul. Furthermore, the razor-edged blade seemed to be ripping their hearts apart, causing them to be extremely fearful. On the other hand, Jushao sect disciples were breaking into a smirk. Now that senior brother was enraged, it was time to show them the distinct difference in their strength. Before they had arrived, Elder Liang had long laid things out for them. The genius of 3 years ago, Mie Chongqi, had been imprisoned for killing one of their own, and Glory sect no longer has any strong support of their own. While Zhang Henshin could be considered strong, he was nothing compared to Xinfeng. Xinfeng continued to expand out his sword will to encompass the entire surrounding area, forcing it upon every single disciple present. This sword seems extraordinary. What is it? Hands behind his back, Lin Fan stepped forward as his calm eyes slowly surveyed the gleaming Xinfeng. A sword is a sword. Xinfeng replied coldly as 2 swords appeared within his pupils, emitting strong aura of their own. No harm receiving a sword of yours anyways. Give it to me. Lin Fan's aura exploded with dominance, as though nothing in this world could faze him. Xinfeng snorted coldly as the sword left his hand and flew towards Lin Fan's hands. The sword has only one master in a lifetime. Do take care of your hands. Xinfeng stared at Lin Fan fixedly. The sword was filled with unparalleled sword will. In the hands of anyone other than its master, the wielder of the sword would suffer immense mental torture from the sword will emitted by it. But even then, Xinfeng did not care. He just had to show Lin Fan some pain. Lin Fan held onto the sword and smiled. Ding! Eternal demon body experience points +1. Upon touching the sword, Lin Fan could feel the powerful sword will surge through his body. But alas, it was of no use to someone like him. Looking at someone other than senior brother Xinfeng holding his sword, all the disciples of Jushao sect were completely dumbfounded. The smile on Elder Liang's face gradually vanished. There was something wrong with this disciple of Glory sect. How could he wield the sword which was infused with the sword will of his own disciple after countless years of being together with him? Furthermore, he wasn't even experiencing any adverse effects at all. Something was not right. Just then, something even more shocking happened. Lin Fan lifted the sword and swung it towards his chest. Clang! The sound of metal breaking rose, silencing the entire crowd. The moment Xinfeng's sword touched Lin Fan's body, it shattered into pieces, and only the handle dropped onto the floor. Everyone dropped their jaws. Even Wu Ye and Liang Yichu were somewhat stunned. Do you dare to receive a brick from me? Lin Fan pulled out his right hand holding onto a red, shiny brick. The brick looked extremely ordinary, without anything special about it. But a normal brick as such coupled with Lin Fan's imposing aura was enough to give everyone a repressive feeling. Translator's thoughts. Lamb. Okay, if you guys are somewhat confused over what it means to receive something from the other party, you can think of it as boxers giving opponents free punches. Would you dare to receive a punch blow from me? Hope this clarifies things. Cheers. Chapter 173. Did we think too much? Chapter 173. Did we think too much? Xinfeng's haughty face had yet to recover from the shock of what just happened. His sword was gone, just like that. That was the sword he had painstakingly infused all his sword aura into. How could this be possible? While Xinfeng was burning inside, he knew he had to endure. He could not show it. If he did, where would Jushao sect's face go? His heart was undergoing a turbulence. But he had to endure. He had to. He must not let it out. No matter how painful it was, he had to swallow it in. He had to let the other party know that he could do with or without this sword. Xinfeng smiled, withstanding the terrible pain within his heart. The disappearance of Xinfeng's sword will aura woke all the Glory sect disciples up. But looking at the sight before them, they fell into yet another trance. Everyone then started discussing excitedly. Junior Master Lin is simply too strong. Just looking at that sword was enough to feel its immense power. To think that Junior Master Lin could shatter it with just a touch. What a man. So, this is what Jushao sect's disciples are capable of. Even their toys are broken by Junior Master Lin. What a feeling. When he took out that scary-looking sword, I thought we were pretty much done for. But when Junior Master Lin slapped it down just like that, I knew I was thinking too much, ha ha ha. Look at those pale faces of the Jushao sect disciples. ... Do you dare to receive a brick from me? This was Lin Fan's third time repeating it. Under the bright sun, the red brick shone ever more brightly scarlet. The skies changed, and the winds stopped blowing. Time stood still as Lin Fan stood there, gazing at Xinfeng fixedly. This little kid trying to put on such a farce. Lin Fan could not take it at all. One could be scared, one could cower in fright and run. All these were things that Lin Fan could endure and dismiss with a flick of his robes. But to act strong in front of yours truly? No chance, my friend. No chance. How could anyone not know that in Lin Fan's entire life, there was only one kind of person he hated the most, people who acted strong. Xinfeng looked at Lin Fan with his heart thumping furiously, somewhat suffocating within. He hated this feeling. The man before him was a genius of Glory Sect. How could he lose to someone like Lin Fan? He looked at the brick in Lin Fan's hands. It was just a normal-looking brick without any trace of true energy. It was neither a light weapon, nor was it a legendary weapon. Unless, a thought flashed through Xinfeng's head. This man before him did not intend to do anything to him. All he wanted to do was to provide a pedestal for Jushao sect to step down from by using a normal brick. What was to happen if he were to slap himself with the brick? One need not think much to know that it would naturally shatter just the same way his sword had shattered when Lin Fan swung it on his chest. And just like that, everything would end peacefully, both sides even as everyone would go back happily to prepare for the sparring. Ha ha, Xinfeng laughed as he finally understood it all. Seemed like this man was pretty gracious to provide them with a pedestal to save face after all. To retain Jushao sect's face, what was a slap with a brick? Wu Ye and Liang Yichu glanced at each other. They too had the same conclusion that Xinfeng had. Even though Wu Ye and Liang Yichu liked to bicker with one another, their ties with each other were still sturdy and dated back for a long time after all. Now that things had come to this, while both sides had their fair share of snide remarks made, it'd be best for things to end on a good note. Wu Ye looked at Lin Fan and couldn't help but nod his head in approval as well. What an interesting fellow. Not only that, he knew how to sustain the ties of friendship. A man who knew how to cherish relationships, these were the type of characters that Wu Ye liked within his disciples, even if this man was not directly under Glory Sect, but the 6th Grand Master of the Saint Devil Sect. But nevertheless, the Saint Devil Sect was a part of Glory Sect. If this guy were trained well and could eventually take over the post of Grand Master one day, that'd be a good thing as well. Wu Ye did not say anything. He was waiting for the brick show to be over. But he told himself that he must take good care of this man from henceforth. Perhaps he should even recommend him up to the Grand Master. While a talented disciple was essential to a sect, to have a disciple who was both skilled and wise, that was even rarer to find. Not only must a Grand Master possess immense strength, but he must also possess a gracious and generous heart. Brother Yichu, since my disciple has received the sword, let's both make do and let this be done with, Wu Ye said. Liang Yichu looked at Wu Ye's expression and smiled warmly as well as he put up a big thumbs up, indicating that it was Glory Sect's fortune to be able to own such a wise and capable disciple. Disciple, receive his brick then. Liang Yichu laughed. Yes, Xinfeng did not hesitate nor fear at all. After all, what was it to receive a brick? It was just like any other brick anyways. At this point, Xinfeng also had a feeling of appreciation towards Lin Fan as a man. Not only were their personalities alike, but their thoughts and actions under tough circumstances were also similar as well. Once this was over, Xinfeng would not mind having this man as the first friend in his life. Xinfeng surveyed Lin Fan. Those haughty eyes of his etched Lin Fan's face deep into his heart. Buddy, I'm befriending you for life. Come on. Xinfeng raised his head high. Trembling slightly, he pushed forward, as though to give Lin Fan an easier time. Lin Fan chuckled coldly in his heart. Looking at the 9-5 brick in his hand, he was heartened that it finally had its place in the battlefield once more. Good. Do not fear, it will not cause you any harm. Lin Fan said. Xinfeng lowered his head as he broke into a grin. Of course, there wouldn't be any harm. He was a genius of Jushao sect. How could he be harmed by just a mere brick? Don't worry, buddy. Your thoughtful actions, I've already seen through it. Thanks, bro. Lin Fan's hands quivered slightly, as though he barely had any strength. The surrounding disciples who were watching were puzzled as well. Just what was happening? But the next second, everyone understood instantaneously. Bam! A light touch. Lin Fan turned around. Without even looking back, he kept the brick within his storage. What a disappointment. Not even worthy of a single blow. Lin Fan raised his head up into the air and sighed. He placed a finger on Xinfeng's forehead. Plop! Something unbelievable happened. Xinfeng's body just collapsed onto the ground instantaneously. The air was silent. No one could understand what was happening. Lin Fan looked at Senior Elder Wuya and nodded. Walking off into the distance, a voice came from his direction after a moment, and that's all that Jushao sect disciples are capable of. Even though he had long disappeared, the voice lingered on, booming through both sects, disciples like thunder. Wuya looked at Lin Fan's disappearing back view, then at Xinfeng, who had collapsed lifelessly on the ground. He was entirely stupefied. Did we think too much? Translator's thoughts. Lam. Anyone here understood the no chance, my friend. No chance, reference. Haha. Chapter 174, The Road to Zhang Ergus Rise. Chapter 174, The Road to Zhang Ergus Rise. Without looking back even once, Lin Fan continued heading forward. Once he was confident he was far enough from the rest of them, he came to a stop. Instantaneously, that solemn expression of his turned into joyful glee. Thinking back at what happened, Lin Fan couldn't help but burst out in laughter continuously. N-O-V-L-B in .C Ohm. From that haughty entrance he made to how he crushed Xinfeng spectacularly, especially the part where he broke Xinfeng's sword with no effort truly brought the atmosphere to a new height. And just at that climax, he brought Xinfeng down with a single tap. Oh my, he was getting embarrassed just recalling these memories. There were only two words that could describe this, FCK yeah. Recalling Senior Elder Wuya's dumbfounded expression, he must have been so impressed by Lin Fan's actions that he was lost for words. Lin Fan wondered how much Senior Elder Wuya must be leaping with joy within his heart. Especially at such a critical moment, Lin Fan managed to salvage Glory Sect's face in one fell swoop. He must definitely be in for a big reward when he got back. But Lin Fan wondered as well about why there weren't any loud cheers of exuberance. Were they still in a state of shock? But oh well, so be it. Happy as one could be, he leapt with every step back to the nameless peak. Glory Sect's entrance. Wuya looked at Liang Yichu helplessly with a hint of apology in his look, as though he was apologetic that Jushao sect had to go through this. But now that things had come to this, there was no salvaging it. Liang Yichu's rotund belly trembled slightly. He looked somewhat lost, somewhat stunned. Every single Jushao sect disciple kept their mouths shut. They were in complete disbelief. Senior brother Shin, he lost, just like that. Where was the promised dominance? Where was the promised victory? When Jushao sect disciples exchanged glances with the Glory Sect disciples, all of their eyes were somewhat embarrassed as well. They had guessed the start right. But they had not expected this outcome. Wow. Just then, Glory Sect disciples erupted in cheers. Junior Master Lin was simply too strong. His level of strength was unbelievable. With just the simple tap of a brick, their so-called genius disciple collapsed to the ground instantly. If they had already idolized Junior Master Lin for his pill-cultivating skills, they now thoroughly worshipped him for his strength as well. None of them felt a single trace of true energy within the brick. That was to say, that is just any other normal brick. In their minds, there was only one possibility. Junior Master Lin was worried that he would injure the opponent with any other weapon. Thus, he had to resort to using a brick. But what a display of strength that was. Just a simple brick was enough to knock out the other party. Indeed, what a man he was. 1 minute later, Xinfeng woke up. He was lost. What had happened? Looking at the surroundings, he realized something was off. Closing his eyes tightly, he tried to recall what had happened. That puzzled expression turned into one of rage. He had never expected himself to lose. And to think that he caused Jushao sect to lose face. Master, Xinfeng felt ashamed. He had disgraced his sect and his master's teachings. He had lost at this crucial moment. Liang Yichu was extremely depressed within his heart. Looking at his old friend, one who he had known for 100+ years, would heaven never give him a chance to one-up this old buddy ever. Brother Yichu, fellow geniuses, Glory Sect has prepared a great feast to welcome your grand arrival. Please follow me. Wuya did not know what else he could say to defuse the awkward situation, so he changed the topic entirely. Ah, Brother Wuya, bravo, bravo. Liang Yichu stood in front of Wuya, commenting downheartedly. Brother Yichu, you can't entirely blame it on us Glory Sect either. After all, you were the one who started it. Liang Yichu looked at Wu Ye and waved his hands, motioning for the latter to forget about it. He no longer had anything to say. Lin Fan, who was approaching Nameless Peak, finally heard the commotion coming from the distance behind him. He grinned once more. While these cheers might have come somewhat late, it was still a series of recognition. Master. Kaiser Chow, who was holding onto her little pouch, bounced around Lin Fan. Lin Fan fondled his loving disciple's head. The pain of separation was the most forgettable for young kids. After all, they were not as sentimental as adults. Master, is my pet ready? Alright, I'll hand it over to you now. After merging with the essence blood of its ancestor, the snow lion cub had completely absorbed it within its body. How it would grow from now on was entirely up to the heavens. Lin Fan retrieved the cub. It was already able to open its eyes as it sprawled on Lin Fan's palms, wailing gently. The moment the cub came out, it attracted Kaiser Chow's attention immediately. Master, it's so cute, can I hug it please please please? Kaiser Chow tugged on Lin Fan's sleeves happily. Yes, Master will impart onto you a beast-taming manual. If there's anything you don't know in the future, come and ask me. Lin Fan did not dare to impart any mental skills nor martial skills to Kaiser Chow. After all, she was still a young kid. If he were to impart such stuff to her, she might end up on the wrong side due to curiosity. Hence, Lin Fan decided to take it one step at a time. When she grew older and wiser, he'd impart them to her one by one. As Lin Fan was imparting the beast-taming manual to her, he asked, Where is your big senior brother? With a slightly stunned expression, she replied, over there. Looking at where she pointed, Lin Fan frowned. Wasn't that the cliff? What the hell would he be there for? Could it be that he was contemplating about his worthless life? After he was done with Kaiser Chow, Lin Fan headed to the cliff immediately. He had to see what Zhang Ergo was up to. At the cliff of Nameless Peak, the scenery was beautiful. With white clouds all around, it was like heaven on earth. Two figures stood there still. You, Lan, I really, like you. Zhang Ergo's face was flushed red as he stuttered with all his courage. Lin Fan, who was walking over, came to a halt. That calm heart of his was suddenly experiencing turbulences all over. Lin Fan did not believe that Zhang Ergo would dare to confess to someone. This was earth-shattering news. Just then, a soft female voice bobbed over. Brother Zhang, you're a great person. Your tenderness has always been within my heart. If only we've known each other earlier. Yulan, it's not too late that we know each other now. Hearing Yulan's praises of himself, Zhang Ergo was fuzzy all over. He was hopeful now that she was praising him. Under the guise of his invisibility, Lin Fan stood nearby and shook his head helplessly. Ergo, why are you so stupid? Can't you make out her meaning already? Lin Fan could easily comprehend her meaning behind her words. Ergo, I truly do not wish to be with you. Just tenderness is not enough. Your cultivation base is simply too low. You should have realized it on your own earlier. Brother Zhang, I ought to head back. If not, senior sister will give me a good scolding. Yulan said softly. Without a care for Zhang Ergo's pleas to stay, she left cruelly. And just like that, the place was left eerily silent. Zhang Ergo stood there alone at the cliff. From those beady eyes of his, beads of tears came dripping. Looking at Zhang Ergo's downcast state, even Lin Fan felt somewhat heartbroken. A master was like a father. How could he allow his own disciple to lose face like this? At that very moment, Lin Fan came up with a new plan. The road to Zhang Ergo's rise. Chapter 175, Ways of a Good Host. Chapter 175, Ways of a Good Host. Lin Fan headed back silently. Zhang Ergo's grooming plan was slowly coming into shape within his mind. As for the specifics, he needed time to go through it thoroughly. After all, Zhang Ergo had received a huge blow in life, and was going to be reclusive for quite some time. In the evening, before the sun had set, a group of unwanted guests arrived at Nameless Peak. Lin Fan, the sect has nowhere else to house them. Hence, I offered them residence at yours. Senior Elder Wu Ye came and explained things personally. No problem, they're most welcome. Upon hearing Senior Elder Wu Ye's request, Lin Fan was delighted. He was a wonderful host. Of course, he'd welcome these foreign friends with open arms. Rest assured that I'll take the best care of them, Elder. Lin Fan said solemnly. He then turned to the group of Jushao sect disciples and smiled widely as a kind host should. You don't have to do that either. The sparring takes place tomorrow. They'll only be here for one night. Wu Ye nodded and smiled. Even though what happened in the noon had caused Jushao sect to lose face tremendously, Wu Ye believed that Lin Fan did not mean it. Sure, no problem still. After all, it's quiet around here at Nameless Peak. Things would get lively with these guys around. Lin Fan then called out to Zhang Er Go, hurry up and prepare the premises. Remember, bring out all of the best stuff we have for the guests. Even though Zhang Er Go was dealt a heavy blow, he hit it rather well as he headed forth with a smile on his face. Here, senior brothers, please follow me. Even though Zhang Er Go's face was somewhat pitiful, his exuberant and welcoming expression still gave off a good feeling to the guests. Xinfeng looked at Lin Fan with bitterness on his face. He was once again reminded of what had happened today. Even though the feast was sumptuous, it tasted like nothing to Xinfeng. The only thing on his mind were the events of the day. Now that he was on Nameless Peak and caught sight of this guy again, he was naturally displeased. Brother Yichu, please stay here temporarily tonight then. Senior Elder Wuya laughed. Alright, this seems like a pretty decent place as well. I'll let my disciples have a good rest so that they can have a good showing tomorrow. Liang Yichu had long thrown the earlier events to the back of his head. Even though Jushao sect had lost face earlier on, the results of tomorrow's sparring would determine the truth. To be able to regain face was something glorious as well. Senior Elder Wuya, leave this place to me. I'll show these guys the wonderful ways of a good host of Glory sect. It'll be sure to leave an everlasting memory. Lin Fan patted on his own chest. Senior Elder Wuya nodded in approval. For the sect to have a disciple such as Lin Fan was a great fortune for Glory sect indeed. Have a good rest then, Brother Yichu. Wuya bid Liang Yichu goodbye as he left. The moment Senior Elder Wuya left, Lin Fan's face of sincere assurance changed instantaneously as he started laughing evilly. Of all places these guys could land at, they ended up at Nameless Peak. Of course, Lin Fan had to host them nicely. Otherwise, he'd let down the honor of Nameless Peak. Since the sparring was tomorrow, as a member of Glory sect, he had to do his part to allow his fellow juniors to obtain a good result. But, as everyone would know, Lin Fan was not a despicable, shameless and devious man. Such underhanded tricks were, of course, troubling for him. Master, there are so many people. Kaiser Chao clapped happily at the sight of all the crowd at the quiet Nameless Peak. Lin Fan did not say anything as he fondled his darling disciple's head. His eyes glinted as he looked at the crowd. Nightfall. The Jushao sect disciples were gathered in a hall as Liang Yichu was discussing tomorrow's events. For tomorrow's sparring, all of you need to showcase your utmost strength to obtain good results. Liang Yichu was extremely confident. After all, the geniuses present for this sparring this time round were all Jushao sect's elites. Especially his own disciple, who was a genius amongst geniuses. Even though the mishap in the afternoon went awry, he believed that it was just a slip of carelessness on his part. For tomorrow's stage, where the competition was going to be fair, things would be different. Don't worry, Elder, we'll definitely put in our very best tomorrow to obtain the highest honors. The Jushao sect disciples echoed together. Yes, very good, head back to recharge yourselves and gather your mood. We'll go for a good one tomorrow. Within Lin Fan's house, Lin Fan, Zhang Er Go, Mie Chongqi and Feng Buju sat in a circle, and were deep in whispers. Master, what are we to do tonight? Zhang Er Go was clear of his master's capabilities. For these guys to have a peaceful night at Nameless Peak, that was probably close to impossible. Looking at the brightly lit houses outside, Lin Fan let out a smile. Waving for them to gather closer, all four of them bent their heads in a huddle as Lin Fan whispered out his plan. In the end, the four of them looked at each other as each of them let out an evil laugh. The night was dark, very dark. Nameless Peak was mostly quiet, except for the occasional chirp of the birds. The houses on the west were where the Jushao sect disciples resided. Between the houses of every disciple were a couple of other houses. Wang Yangelin was a genius of Jushao sect. While he was definitely nothing much compared to Xinfeng, he was still nothing to be scoffed at in terms of cultivation base or innate potential. Therefore, he was naturally ready for this time's genius sparring. Even though senior brother Xinfeng was strong, Wang Yangelin too craved for battle. Wang Yangelin was seated cross-legged on his bed in cultivation state. Streams of energy emitted from his nose as he breathed out, and swirled around his body before culminating above his head again. Just then, some noises came from outside. Alerted, Wang Yangelin shot upright as he opened his eyes wide. Senior brother, is it true? Do we really have ghosts on Nameless Peak? How would I know? But you should at least have heard of Nameless Peak's history, right? What? History? The men who spoke sounded extremely nervous. Nameless Peak used to be called Graveyard Peak and buried the bodies of disciples who died for Glory Sect. Even though their bodies have since been shifted, it's been said that when night falls, the temperature tends to dip down as these ghosts start roaming the lands. Please don't scare me, senior brother. I'm a timid man. Don't worry, even if these ghosts were to appear, they wouldn't harm you nor me. After all, we're their junior brothers even if they're in the afterlife. Oh, right. Even though the noises outside gradually went away, they remained ringing within Wang Yangelin's ears. Graveyard Peak, burial grounds for disciples who had died. Wang Yangelin could not help but feel goosebumps appear up his neck and arms. Surveying his surroundings, the temperature did seem somewhat cold. Could there really be ghosts? Wang Yangelin stood up from his bed as he looked around warily. Chapter 176, A Night of Tension. Chapter 176, A Night of Tension. The night was really dark. As the wind howled outside, there were dark shadows every now and then appearing through the paper windows. This would have seemed normal to Wang Yangelin on any other day. But after hearing the remarks just now, he was now somewhat nervous. Taking a deep breath, Wang Yangelin stretched his body and reassured himself, how could there be things such as ghosts in this world? Furthermore, my fellow brother disciples are all around. If any ghosts were to appear, they'd be knocked back to the afterlife in no time. In order to calm his mind, Wang Yangelin sat back on his bed and went back to his cultivation state. It was dead silent outside. Suddenly, Wang Yangelin's eyes darted wide open. He had sensed the presence of something outside. But the opening of his eyes brought him an intense terror, as the shadow of a human figure was standing right outside his paper window shone through the moonlight. Who? Wang Yangelin asked in a deep and cautious voice. The figure did not reply. It just stood there, silent and still. Wang Yangelin's breathing grew heavier, as his heart thumped harder with his tightening chest. Gritting his teeth, he darted towards the door and pushed it wide open. He was determined to see who was trying to make a fool of him. But nobody was there. The shadow on his paper window had disappeared as well. Wang Yangelin gulped down his saliva as he stepped back into his house to take a look. But once again, the shadow could be seen clearly from within the house. In fact, it now seemed like it was moving with a twisted neck. Who? This time round, Wang Yangelin was shouting. What's wrong, senior brother? A disciple called out, hearing the commotion. Nothing much. Wang Yangelin gradually calmed down. He asked around, Junior brother, is there anything strange going on around your area? Nopes, not really. The disciple shook his head, puzzled. He came over in front of Wang Yangelin to check things out. Could you be too stressed out, senior brother? No. Wang Yangelin heaved a sigh of relief. Could it be that he was really too stressed out? But at that very moment, Wang Yangelin froze. Behind his junior brother was a ghostly figure. Clad entirely in white, its face was covered entirely with its hair. Wang Yangelin stumbled backward a few steps. When he blinked again, the figure was gone. Senior brother, what's wrong? Wang Yangelin's breathing intensified. No, nothing. I must have seen wrongly. I must be way too tense. Oh, right, relax, senior brother. Have a good rest. Yes. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Back in the house, Wang Yangelin poured himself a cup of tea from the teapot to calm his nerves. Looking down, he noticed that what he was pouring was no longer tea, but blood. He dropped the teapot in shock as it shattered into pieces. Something else was happening. On his bed, words were being scrawled in blood red. What a tragic death I had. Wang Yangelin couldn't stop retreating as he stared at everything in utmost shock. Looking at those bloodied words, Wang Yangelin was trembling from head to toe. Lin Fan, who was in invisibility state, looked at Wang Yangelin's stunned face and chuckled silently. Seemed like this guy was scared just about enough. It was time to move on to the next victim. With this scare, Wang Yangelin remained awake the entire night, keeping himself at high alert. This night was equally sleepless for some of the other Jushao sect disciples as well. Next day, the sparring was about to begin. The sparring was to be held at Zongtian Peak, where Glory Sect's biggest stage was housed. The arrangements around the stage were specially decorated by Zongtian Peak's own senior elder, Lu Mingyang. Things were set such that disciples could enjoy the sparring thoroughly without any fear of safety issues. Zongtian Peak was extremely crowded, as disciples of Glory Sect swarmed and gathered to observe this once in 3 years spar. Not only were they full of hopes for Glory Sect to do well, but they were also ready to be amazed by their senior brother's spectacular performances. Just then, Lin Fan was deep in discussion with senior elder Wuya. He had had no intentions of joining the sparring, but was forced up the stage by Senior Elder Wuya. Ah, Lin Fan, I've already told them yesterday that you're a genius of the sect. Please bear with it and head up for a spar. Doesn't that just show how little confidence you have for our sect's geniuses, Elder Wuya? The thought came across Lin Fan's head. Senior Elder Wuya probably had no other candidates. Hence, he had no choice but to look for Lin Fan. After all, it was Lin Fan's own fault for being such a dazzling character. Wuya looked at Lin Fan, those eyes of his seemed to be saying, you know way too much. Arrival of the Jushao sect members. An announcement was made. Elder Liang Yichu appeared with his disciples following tightly behind him. But what startled the Glory sect disciples was the fact that those disciples seemed somewhat worse for wear. They looked haggard beyond words, as though they did not have rest for the past couple of days. Look at those Jushao sect disciples. What happened to them? They look really tired out. No idea, but they look as though they could collapse at any moment. Wang Yangelin was within the crowd, but he looked totally listless. After what happened last night, he had not a wink of sleep as he was filled with tension. He did not even dare to close his eyes, as though something fearful would happen once he did so. Looking at Wang Yangelin, Lin Fan felt helpless as well. After all, how could a man with such a high cultivation base be so timid? Ghosts. Goodness, if anyone heard of it, they'd be laughing their asses off. Lin Fan headed over to the inner sect disciples area. Zhang Henshin sat there, eyes closed in concentration. How's it going? Lin Fan patted him on the shoulders. Still all right, Junior Master. Zhang Henshin was somewhat nervous as well. Especially looking at Xinfeng with his pompous aura, Zhang Henshin's eyelids twitched a little. Good luck, Junior Master Lin. Someone shouted from behind Zhang Henshin. It was Yi Shaoshan. Yes, Lin Fan nodded his head. Junior Master, we'll all be rooting for you over here. The disciples they've sent over feel much stronger than 3 years ago. Do take care. Even though Yi Shaoshan and gang were outer sect disciples, their cultivation potential and wisdom were not far off from inner sect disciples. It was just that they had yet to reach the required cultivation base. But it was only a matter of time before they did. Perhaps, some of them might even be able to take part in the sparring 3 years later. Translator's thoughts. Lam. Guys, I hope you guys aren't confused by the paper windows. You can try googling for shoji. It is a form of architecture in Japan, but the concept is the same as the Chinese used to use such windows in the past as well. Cheers. Chapter 177, A Finger to Break All Skills. Chapter 177, A Finger to Break All Skills. Zongtian Peak's podium. Grand Master Yan was seated high up on the podium. He asked softly, Brother Wuya, does Glory Sect have any hopes this time around? Don't worry Senior Brother, I had them stay at Nameless Peak last night. Senior Elder Wuya let out a smile on his face. Yes. Listening to the news, Grand Master Yan nodded his head in satisfaction as well. Let yours truly welcome them personally to showcase our respect for Jushao sect. Wuya followed closely behind his senior brother. The sparring this time around was something Glory sect must definitely win. Even though this batch of Glory sect's disciples' strength was lackluster compared to the previous batch, strength was not all that was required for a victory. To win, one required strategy as well. Planting these guys at Nameless Peak last night, with a guy like Lin Fan around, would they be let off the hook so easily? Hee. Brother Yichu, how was your rest last night? Since the Grand Master had come personally, Liang Yichu had to reply with utmost courtesy. Thank you for your concerns, Grand Master Yan. Everything was fine last night. He said it from his mouth, but his heart was filled with doubts looking at some of his disciples' shagged-out looks. He could not help but wonder what happened last night. But it was all fine. As long as his personal disciple could obtain the first position in the sparring, nothing else would matter. Lin Fan waited patiently among the inner sect disciples for the beginning of the sparring. Even though this was just an agreement between the ancestors in the past, it was now as good as a battle of sorts between the two sects. Dong. The gong rang loudly. Wuya stood high up on the podium and shouted, the 1000th genius sparring will begin officially. Rules of the sparring. 10 disciples from Glory Sect, 10 from Jushao Sect, they will draw their opponents through lots. But remember, the sparring is secondary only to friendship. Our relationship is the most important. No one must take the life of another. The ultimate victor will be the recognized strongest genius of the two sects. Begin drawing lots. Junior Master, let's go draw a lot. Zhang Henshin rose while saying. Yes. In the middle of the sparring ring were 2 sealed boxes, towards which each sect's disciples headed forth. The moment Lin Fan stepped into the ring, he waved to his glory sect disciples. Victory be to Junior Master! Victory be to Junior Master! Zhang Ergo was leading the cheers, waving a huge flag and shouting. Based on his master's instructions, he had created an extremely large flag. Since Glory Sect was the home ground, he was determined to give a good showing to have the other party get nervous. With Zhang Ergo taking charge along with all the other disciples who revered Lin Fan, they cheered in unison. Zongtian Peak's skies were filled with shouts of cheers for Lin Fan. N-O-V-L-B in .C Ohm. To these outer sect disciples, Lin Fan was their most idolized man in the sect. Therefore, they naturally hoped that their own sect would take victory in the genius sparring as well. Grand Master Yan, who was on the podium, smiled at the scene. He was heartened by what was happening. Brother Yichu, what do you think of our disciples? Aren't they energetic? Wuya laughed and asked. Liang Yichu took a glance at Wuya and did not say much. All right, I suppose. Liang Yichu could not disagree outright. But he did take notice to remember this scene. When the sparring was to be held at Jushao Sect next, he'd be sure to show these guys the energy of Jushao Sect as well. The disciples who were drawing lots on the ring felt a little shaken by the cheers as well. Grand. They were filled with vigor indeed, these guys. From the depths of their hearts, they actually started feeling a little nervous. After drawing lots, the disciples lined up as Elder Putong took charge of the administrative matters. Junior Master, what's your lot? Zhang Henshin asked while looking at his own lot. Number 10. I wonder which lot that Xinfeng of Jushao Sect has drawn. Zhang Henshin said, somewhat nervous. Lin Fan snuck a peek at Elder Putong's records. Xinfeng had drawn lot 1, which was far from himself. Let the sparring begin. Jushao Sect lot 1, Xinfeng vs Glory Sect lot 1, Cho Tianren. Glory Sect side. Good luck, junior brother. Zhang Henshin patted on Cho Tianren's shoulders. Yes. Cho Tianren took a deep breath before he leapt up the sparring ring. It was much quieter at Jushao Sect's side as Xinfeng leapt up the ring expressionless. Xinfeng's only enemy was Lin Fan. He did not regard anyone else in his eyes. Disciples below were cheering for their respective senior brothers. I don't want to hurt you. Admit your defeat, Xinfeng said coldly. Senior brother Xinfeng, I humbly acknowledge that I am not your match. But to go down without a fight is not something I can accept. Xinfeng snorted coldly. He did not have anything else to say. Begin. The first match started at the call of Elder Putong. No offense, senior brother. Cho Tianren's aura exploded immediately as he pulled a long halberd out of thin air. Disciples who were watching were momentarily stunned at this shocking scene. Indeed, this child Tianren has potential. Senior Elder Wuya nodded in acknowledgement on watching the scene. But it's not enough. Elder Liang Yichu laughed. Even though this disciple was somewhat decent, he was definitely nothing compared to his own Xinfeng. HMPH. Wuya snorted coldly. What a cocky fellow. 9 dragons doom. Just then, Cho Tianren shouted as his body glowed with a golden light, 9 dragons emerging from him into the air, wrapping around the halberd. Tearing apart the air between them, he dashed towards Xinfeng with the halberd pointing towards the latter. Xinfeng was standing with both hands behind his back, and was not in the least bit unnerved. He lifted his hand gently and raised a single finger. Break. Just then, time seemed to come to a still. When Cho Tianren's halberd touched Xinfeng's finger, it stopped instantly. As though it was struck by an aura it could not withstand, the halberd shattered. The 9 dragons coiled around the halberd wailed tragically as they vanished into thin air like smoke. A black flash appeared. The only feeling Cho Tianren felt was as though he was about to be suffocated within his heart. The next thing he knew, Xinfeng was in front of him with a finger on Cho Tianren's forehead. Cho Tianren shuddered, as an aura of death wrapped itself around his heart. You've lost, Xinfeng said as he retracted his finger and turned around. Cho Tianren stood there silently, eventually bowing his head. Thank you for your mercy, senior brother. The audience disciples stood around dumbstruck. They had not expected the first match to end just like that. It was indeed instantaneous. There was no reaction at all. On the other hand, cheers erupted from Jushao Sect's side. Those cheers were like heavy hammers, smashing down on Glory Sect disciples' heavy hearts. How was it, Brother Wuya? A finger which can break all skills, the highest state of sword mastery. Liang Yichu smiled. HMPH. Wuya turned his head around, refusing to reply the other party. He even rolled his eyes backward. First match. Victory to Jushao Sect's Xinfeng. Second match. Zhu Xiao Sect Lot 2 Feng Xiaoling vs Glory Sect Lot 2 Zong Henshin. Chapter 178. This piece of sky belongs to me. Chapter 178. This piece of sky belongs to me. It's him. Zong Henshin's expression changed, as he looked at the man who stood up. Who is he? Lin Fan asked. He is one of Zhu Xiao Sect's disciples who is very strong. I saw him once in the Forbidden Grounds expedition. And he was strong, very strong. Zong Henshin's mind had some misgivings about this now. He had not noticed it at the start. But upon hearing the name, he started having some recollections. The loss of the first match had already been a morale suppressor for Glory Sect. Zong Henshin had thought that he would have a firm victory in the second match to stabilize the crowd. But by the looks of it, things weren't going to be so easy after all. Fellow brothers, I was unable to win. Cho Tianren walked over with his head bowed down, somewhat downcast. Evidently, he was both blaming himself for the loss and feeling helpless for drawing out Xinfeng's lot in the first match. Don't be too hard on yourself, junior brother. Junior Master is probably the only one who can match up with Xinfeng. To even bear courage to face him without cowering, that's the biggest victory you could have given us. Zong Henshin consoled him. Yes, Cho Tianren nodded as he looked at Zong Henshin. You're up next, senior brother. Good luck. Zong Henshin nodded his head. Towards this, he did not have the utmost confidence. Lin Fan took a look at Feng Xiaoling of Zhu Xiao Sect. Given Zong Henshin's current strength, the chances of him taking this was going to be quite a challenge. The chance was slim. Even though he was not as strong as Xinfeng, Lin Fan could tell that Feng Xiaoling was nothing to be scoffed at. FCK man. The more Lin Fan looked, the more pissed he was. How come Zhu Xiao Sect's disciples all made their Glory Sect's disciples look like PSSIES? But thinking back of Mie Changqi, Lin Fan understood as well. If Mie Changqi had not committed the mistake, he would be undefeatable in the genius sparring today as well. Even Xinfeng would not be a match for Mie Changqi. But now that Lin Fan had Mie Changqi trained under him, and thus unable to take part in the sparring, there was naturally no one left to deal with Xinfeng. Brother Wuya, even though Feng Xiaoling is nothing compared to my disciple, can still be considered number 1 or 2 among the geniuses. I'm afraid that your disciples aren't going to stand a chance against him. Liang Yichu smiled. Wuya took a look at Grandmaster Yan. Grandmaster Yan's expression was warm and calm, totally unfazed by the loss of Glory Sect. Wuya sighed helplessly. Victory is yet to be determined, Brother Yichu. Don't count your eggs too early. Nah, that's impossible. Liang Yichu waved his hands. Based on their cultivation bases, one could determine whose victory it was going to be easy. Henshin, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you of winning? Lin Fan asked. 3. Zong Henshin hesitated slightly before giving his highest possibility. Zong Henshin was not someone who was humble. Therefore, if he were certain of this victory, he would be extremely confident. This just showed that he was clearly aware of the opponent's strength this time around. From the Forbidden Grounds expedition, even though Zong Henshin had not exchanged blows with him directly, he was able to make out just how strong this man was by looking at him. Yours truly can grant you a firm victory, but you have to undergo some pains. With this matchup, Lin Fan too was uncomfortable with losing 2 in a row. No matter what, he had to make it a tie at least. As long as I can win, I'm willing to endure anything, Junior Master. Zong Henshin looked at Lin Fan earnestly. As long as he could take this back for Glory Sect, he would do anything. Looking at Zong Henshin's determined face, Lin Fan nodded. He then waved around. Come guys, huddle around me. Even though the other geniuses did not know what Lin Fan was up to, they still huddled closely with his orders. Surrounding Lin Fan and Zong Henshin, no one could see what they were up to. Ripping off his sleeve, Lin Fan handed it to Zong Henshin. Here, bite onto this. Do not scream out loud. Lin Fan was ready for a massacre as he prepared to decimate his own teammates. Ball kicking had 2 effects. 1. One would instantly lose all will to fight. 2. One would be driven into a frenzy and explode with pure power. Even though both effects differed from one another, the pain one would feel was the same. Looking at Junior Master Lin's solemn expression, Zong Henshin took a deep breath and bit onto the sleeve. He nodded his head repeatedly, indicating to Junior Master Lin that he was ready. Open your legs, Lin Fan ordered. Without hesitation, Zong Henshin spread open his legs. Lin Fan's expression changed as he stared at Zong Henshin's crotch area. His mind began turning away, calculating the velocity, angle, and strength he would use. Zong Henshin's forehead started beating with sweat. This sweat was not from any pain, but rather, nervousness. Just what was Junior Master Lin about to do? What sort of method would grant him a guaranteed victory? But looking at Junior Master Lin's solemn expression, he knew that the method would be nothing simple. Alright, bear with it. At that moment, Lin Fan's eyes sparkled as his legs flew towards Zhang Henshin's crotch, carrying an aura of impotence. Bam! A dull thud rang out and Zhang Henshin's body shuddered, as though he was suffering from fits. Zhang Henshin's initial flushed look turned a brilliant tomato red, as the veins on his neck began pulsating. Blood veins filled his pupils as his breathing intensified. Zhang Henshin took out the sleeve from his mouth as he struggled to stand still, his body twisted in different directions. His mouth was agape, as though he had many things to say but could not produce any sound. Alright, bear with it. Withstand this pain, and redirect it to your opponent. Lin Fan knew that Zhang Henshin must be in terrible pain. But for the sake of victory, he had to endure it. Will both parties enter the ring? Elder Putong shouted. Feng Xiaoling smiled as he leapt onto the ring gracefully. His long hair blew with the wind as he looked elegantly handsome. Stretching out his fingers, he spread open a fan in his palms. This atmosphere, this stance. Countless of men would be ashamed of being near such a handsome man. Even though the female disciples of Glory Sect were supposed to be rooting on for Glory Sect disciples, they too were momentarily stunned by his suaveness. What a handsome youth. Lu Mingyang sat on the podium and couldn't help but comment. Liang Yichu laughed upon hearing this comment. He is number one in Jushao Sect for gracefulness, and is the ideal companion in the hearts of many female disciples. A combination of beauty and strength, he is indeed an ideal disciple. Looking at Liang Yichu's smugness, Wu Ye glared at Lu Mingyang. Wasn't this boosting the ego of others at the sake of oneself? Lu Mingyang looked at senior brother Wu Ye's expression and chuckled helplessly as well. And just then, Zhang Henshin appeared on the ring. But something shocking happened. Zhang Henshin's legs were spread open, as though there was something wrong with him as he walked a step at a time. Even Wu Ye frowned at that somewhat comical walking style of Zhang Henshin. Disgraceful. This was a disgrace to the sect. Brother Wu Ye, what an appearance by your genius. Indeed, this is a rare sight indeed. Liang Yichu laughed out loudly. Ha ha, is that guy sick or what? Jushao Sect's disciples burst out laughing as well, pointing at Zhang Henshin. Indeed, talented people do come out of Glory Sect. Ha ha. Zhang Henshin could only relieve himself slightly of the pain by spreading his legs wide open. As to Junior Master Lin's method, Zhang Henshin still could not feel the difference at this point. The only thing he could feel right now was tremendous pain. But he believed that Junior Master Lin would not deceive him. Junior Master Lin had told him, the moment he could stand upright with both legs, this piece of sky would belong to him, Zhang Henshin. Translator's thoughts. Lam lam. This is hilarious, ha 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 ha. Chapter 179. Nothing to look forward to. Chapter 179. Nothing to look forward to. Sparring ring. Both disciples were initially pretty evenly matched up in terms of disposition. But the way Zhang Henshin looked now, Feng Xiaoling's demeanor completely and utterly crushed Zhang Henshin like an ant. I've heard of your name back at Jushao Sect. You're one of the strongest geniuses of this generation's disciples for Glory Sect. Feng Xiaoling praised Zhang Henshin. But another way to take it could be, hearing about you is nothing compared to meeting you here right now. What a disappointment. You're not worthy of being coined as the equivalent of me back in Jushao Sect. Feng Xiaoling was suave as he fanned himself gently, entirely disregarding Zhang Henshin's presence. Those high and mighty eyes of his let out a hint of disdain. Zhang Henshin wanted to rebut him badly, but he did not dare to open his mouth with this ongoing pain. He was afraid that he might pass out any moment if he did not focus on keeping awake. Junior Master Lin's method was way too cruel. If he had known beforehand, he would have chosen to lose than to endure such a pain. This pain was not something that was only limited to his physical self, but mental self as well. Good luck, senior brother Zhang. The geniuses who were participating waved to Zhang Henshin, rooting him on. The audience disciples looked at one another. Gritting their teeth, they too broke into cheers. No matter what, Zhang Henshin was their senior brother. No matter how disgraceful this was, they still hoped that he would win. Begin. Elder Putong looked at Zhang Henshin and sighed. What's happening to Glory Sect these days? And oh well be in .c ohm. Are we really bound to lose this year? By the looks of it, Jushao Sect is going to take this match as well, brother Wu Ye. Liang Yichu chuckled as he watched the ring. Wu Ye was speechless as he remained fixated on the ring. Towards Liang Yichu's smugness, he had no way to refute it. Buck up. Feng Xiaoling folded up his fan and pointed it at Zhang Henshin, strike then. I'm afraid that you might not have a chance to if I was to strike first. Feng Xiaoling's speech enraged the glory sect disciples as they discussed vehemently. What a cocky fella, this guy is even cockier than Xinfeng. Even though I've got no idea why senior brother Zhang is in this state today, but he should not have made those comments either way. Senior brother Zhang is one of our strongest geniuses. What rights does he have to look down on senior brother Zhang? Good luck, senior brother Zhang. Give this guy a taste of what glory sect's powers are. ... Zhang Henshin's blood-filled eyes glared at Feng Xiaoling. He was in such pain that there was no room for mercy anymore. But what he was furious about was that even though this guy was so bloody arrogant, his attention was still directed towards the pain in his own crotch. Strike. Stop wasting time. Feng Xiaoling placed his hands behind his back as he stared at Zhang Henshin. Stand up and settle this. There are still matches to carry on from here on. Lin Fan shouted over to Zhang Henshin. To Lin Fan, the moment that Zhang Henshin exploded, Feng Xiaoling would definitely not be his match. Even though Zhang Henshin was the first participant of this experiment, he was confident that a product of the system was definitely of good quality. That's an interesting fellow of a teammate you have. Since he knows that you're bound to lose, he's hurrying you on for the rest of us. I think you should just admit defeat here. After all, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Feng Xiaoling laughed. You're wrong. Zhang Henshin took a deep breath, his voice somewhat hoarse. Feng Xiaoling's face changed slightly. Zhang Henshin began to stand up more, and his legs were now only slightly spread. At that point, Zhang Henshin's energy within his body was already flowing at its peak, emitting sounds of vibrations within him. Ah! Zhang Henshin's eyes focused as those eyes of his turned entirely bloodshot. Standing upright, the pain within his body had reached its epitome. That long hair of his which was flowing with the wind began to stand upright. I can't take it anymore. Fight! Zhang Henshin's sudden explosive roar shot out like a shockwave across the ring. Audience disciples who were of lower cultivation bases could feel their hearts trembling. Lin Fan looked at the ring, startled as well. He had not expected ball kicking to be this effective. This Zhang Henshin right now was worlds apart from the initial Zhang Henshin. How could this be? Liang Yichu, who was watching the entire situation unfold, could not believe his eyes. In just an instant, a burst of power radiated from within that disciple. Wuya, who had begun to lose hope for this match, perked up. He had felt the difference in Zhang Henshin's powers. This aura was strong, way stronger than before. Come! Zhang Henshin roared again as a whirlwind began swirling around his legs. He gripped his scalp. The pain from his crotch area had risen up to his entire body. He could no longer bear it anymore. Feng Xiaoling's arrogant look changed as well. This. Before Feng Xiaoling could continue, the frenzied Zhang Henshin screamed out. Receive a palm from me. Zhang Henshin strode forward. Every step he took which made contact with the ground burst out like thunder. True energy exploded from Zhang Henshin's palm in Feng Xiaoling's direction, repressing the latter. Feng Xiaoling got serious as he gathered up his true energy as well. Laughing, he said, fine. Since you want it rough, let's have a go at it. He too shot out his palm, shooting out true energy. It was time to see who was the stronger one between him and Zhang Henshin. Standing amongst the genius disciples, Lin Fan let out a smile. There's no need to watch anymore. Victory is clear. Bam! A loud explosion happened as the true energies met with each other in the middle, forming a typhoon of true energy. And that's all. Feng Xiaoling laughed coldly, but his face changed in disbelief suddenly. How could this be? Zhang Henshin's face was flushed red as steam erupted from his head. Bam! Zhang Henshin's true energy shot out at Feng Xiaoling, as the latter flew off the sparring ring like a kite which had lost its thread. Cheers erupted from the crowd. The Jushao sect disciples looked at one another in disbelief. What in the world happened just now? How could Feng Xiaoling lose just like that? Liang Yichu too shot up standing upright, his jaws wide open. He wanted to shout out something, but no words would come out of his mouth. My apologies, Brother Yichu. Small victory. Wuya had just snapped out of his own stupor and laughed. Grand Master Yan had not said anything from the start of the event. But looking at what happened, he too let out a smile. The audience disciples were ecstatic. We won, we won. Haha, to think that we won this easily. Indeed, Senior Brother Zhang is Senior Brother Zhang. To think that this guy was so cocky, but he was sent flying by Senior Brother Zhang in an instant. Even some of the female disciples let out a look of disdain. Good to look at, but with no substance. Second match. Glory sect disciple, Zhang Henshin. Victory. Again, Zhang Henshin glared at Feng Xiaoling, who was knocked out, while roaring. That palm was filled with sweat. With the outburst of the palm, his pain was shot out by a little. But now that this guy was knocked out, what was he to do about the remaining pain? Feng Xiaoling struggled to stand up as he looked at Zhang Henshin dumbfounded. He was still trying to figure out what had happened. How did he lose so firmly? This. And looking at the surrounding gazes, the handsome Feng Xiaoling blushed, feeling somewhat ashamed. Eventually, Zhang Henshin, who was still roaring uncontrollably on the ring, was dragged down by Lin Fan and the others. The side effects of ball kicking is pretty strong. Not only could it bring out someone's potential, but it could also even bring about some intense battle hunger in them. Even though victory was already determined, Zhang Henshin was still provoking the other party from the ring. How was Feng Xiaoling to hide his little ashamed face like this? Looking at the tragic look on Feng Xiaoling's face was enough to know what a blow he had been dealt by Zhang Henshin. Chapter 180. A good plan is all that's required to take down the world. Chapter 180. A good plan is all that's required to take down the world. Bravo, senior brother Zhang. Even after Zhang Henshin was dragged down, he was still receiving cheers and praises from the genius disciples. While they might have lost the first match, Zhang Henshin's epic comeback for them was nonetheless exhilarating. Zhang Henshin sat down as he gradually calmed down. He looked at Lin Fan with eyes of admiration. This was all made possible thanks to Junior Master Lin. If not for Junior Master Lin, I would not be a match for that guy over there. Recalling himself back on the ring, pounding his chest like a gorilla and taunting Feng Xiaoling, Zhang Henshin grew somewhat embarrassed. The image he had worked on building up in Glory Sect over the past had just disappeared just like that. Junior Master Lin, what was that secret skill you used? Zhang Henshin asked curiously. He had never heard of such a technique. Of course, he knew of certain skills which could increase one's prowess. But those skills were extremely rare to obtain and train up. Not only that, the boost they provided would definitely be nowhere near what Junior Master Lin did. It wasn't a skill, just a method. How did you feel? Extremely painful. Even now, I feel like all my strength has left my body, as if it was sucked up by the thin air. Lin Fan had an inkling of how it worked now. Seemed like one would totally exhaust all their energy after the huge power spike. He wondered if ball kicking would provide the same effect for himself. But the thought was thrown away as quickly as it came. Kidding, he couldn't kick himself anyway. How now, brown cows? Would you guys want to give it a shot? Lin Fan laughed and looked at the other junior disciples. Upon hearing it, all the other genius disciples waved their hands immediately. It's okay, Junior Master Lin. Win or lose, what matters is that we give it our all. That's right, as long as Junior Master Lin takes the first position in the end, that's all that matters. We'll just try our best, that's all. He has got to be shishting them. Looking at what happened to senior brother Zhang had them all furtive. Especially recalling that stance of open-leggedness he was walking with, that was a big no-no. It was okay to lose the spar. The key thing was that there were many female disciples within the audience watching them. How could they lose all of their image just like that? How were they to find a partner in the future with that? Lin Fan looked at them helplessly. Seemed like it was going to be difficult to look for a few more experimental lab rats. In the matches that went on after, there were both victories and defeat. But on the whole, Zhu Xiao sect seemed to have the advantage. Lin Fan had also gone up once. And as expected, he came off with a crushing victory. The moment Lin Fan went up the ring, his air of imposingness exploded through the audience. Just that aura alone had him at an advantage. The opponent did not even have much will to resist him, and nature just took its course. For the final fight, only 5 remained. 3 Zhu Xiao sect disciples and 2 Glory sect disciples. Brother Wuya, seems like the odds of you guys winning are not in your favor. Liang Yichu was pretty satisfied with these results. However, he was just one step away from getting his ideal results. From his point of view, the winner of the genius sparring had ought to be a Zhu Xiao sect disciple to begin with. Now that things had come to this, victory was pretty much assured for Zhu Xiao sect. Not really, nothing is determined yet, Wuya smiled. Look at that disciple, Brother Wuya. His legs are already starting to tremble. Putting on a strong front. This is as good as having a 3 versus 1. Liang Yichu laughed. Ha. Wuya did not reply. He just rebutted Liang Yichu with his cold laugh. no vel b in c ohm. I'm afraid I'm done for, Junior Master Lin. Zhang Henshin said regrettably. After Junior Master Lin's power boosting, Zhang Henshin had lost all the remaining strength he had. To be able to hold on till now was already a great effort by him. No worries, Lin Fan waved his hands casually. Looking at Junior Master Lin's calm expression, Zhang Henshin calmed down as well. By the looks of it, Junior Master Lin should be pretty assured of victory. Seemed like, it wouldn't matter whether or not he, Zhang Henshin, was around. Looking at the three Jushao sect disciples, Lin Fan was in a predicament as well. FCK, this shit's bad. Based on actual cultivation base, he would definitely not be a match for any one of them even if it were a one-on-one match. Even though he could definitely remain standing after receiving their blows, there was no way he could knock them out with his current strength. What was he to do after he entered the ring? As for the audience disciples, they were deep in discussion. By the looks of it, things weren't looking too good for Glory Sect. What do you think the end will be? No idea, man. It's hard to deny the strength of those three Jushao sect disciples. True, and senior brother Zhang seems somewhat worse for wear. Now that Junior Master Lin is the only one to hold the fort, seems like things are gonna be bad. That's right. Does anyone know what Junior Master Lin's cultivation base is? Actually, I've got no idea at all. Lin Fan knew that he had to come up with a plan. He couldn't just head up there to take them down one by one. But wait, if it were just 1 versus 1 with Xinfang, he might be able to come up with something. Taking a step forward, Lin Fan raised his head and looked at the Jushao sect disciples in disdain. Xinfang. We're both the strongest geniuses respectively. Let's not waste time, just the two of us, one-on-one in the ring for a final bout. How about that? Xinfang looked at Lin Fan and replied in a huff, sure. Towards Lin Fan's words, none of the other geniuses had anything to refute. After all, they could not deny in their hearts that Xinfang was the strongest genius in Jushao sect. Rather than wasting everyone's time, it'd be better to let the two of them duke it out. Not bad, brother Wuya. Seems like your disciple is pretty street smart to understand my Xinfang's character so thoroughly. But just little tricks like these aren't enough to secure him the victory. You know that, right? Liang Yichu said. Well, you tell me then. What can your other disciples do even if they head up to the ring? Isn't that still a waste of time in the end? Wuya replied calmly. Lin Fan and Xinfang stood on the stage, glaring at each other with gleams in their eyes. I was careless with what happened yesterday. You'll be dreaming if you think that you can repeat the same thing again. Regarding yesterday's incident, Xinfang deeply thought about it. There was definitely something wrong with that brick. This time round, he was not going to let the other party have a chance to get close to him. Oh, Brother Feng, my apologies for what happened yesterday as well. I reflected upon myself upon heading back, and I concluded that I was in the wrong too. Lin Fan sighed. No point harping over it. True strength lies within us. Today, I, Xinfang, shall take the glory of being the strongest genius. Xinfang replied coldly. Xinfang had thought that he had gotten to know a kindred spirit, and was heartened somewhat to think that he could have finally made the first friend in his life. But to think that this guy completely disregarded him as a person. Infuriating. He needed to definitely let Lin Fan know just how terrifying he could be. Looking at Xinfang's determined face to take him down, Lin Fan's mind began tinkering rapidly. He had already started to come up with a plan. This time round, he must let Xinfang understand how devious the world could be. One must be wise of the dangers out in the open.